everyone will be coming in clean slate, and then you just have this giant blood bowl of the 30 best teams on Earth.
I want to learn, like, for myself when I'm watching a game, who's good at what, who's bad at what, why are they good, or stuff like that.
It's not fair that you go up against a Masters winner that early on in a tournament. They always were that good.
Hold on, I got all the EMEA tiers in here. Tasty.
We've got a lot to talk about. We've got some spicy things to talk about. But most importantly, we're coming towards the end of the year. 2022 is almost over. 2023 is about to start, and there's a lot of questions about what 2023 brings. And fortunately for you guys, we finally have the answers. So let's go ahead and take a look at a video that'll show us kind of the layout for 2023.
Hey everyone. Today I'm here to share more on our plans for the future of Valorant esports and the experiences we want to create for you next year. The growing Valorant community and your passion for the game have pushed us to dream big about what this esport could be. We want to build an esport that will meet the overwhelming demand we're seeing in every corner of the world. We want to highlight rising superstars and create bigger and more creative shows. We're taking everything we've learned, adding in a few new ideas, and forming partnerships that will help us realize our dreams for the next edition of the Valorant Champions Tour. Next year is going to introduce a new structure with 30 teams competing in 3 new international leagues. In normal years, our plan is to operate 2 international league splits each season. But as teams will be busy setting up in their new global hubs, we're going to take this opportunity to do something special. To recognize this landmark transition, instead of a regular split, we're going to kick off the next season by hosting the largest international tournament in VCT history. To celebrate the start of the new season, we're going to invite every partnered team to Sao Paulo, Brazil for 3 weeks of high-stakes competition. We'll meet the new rosters, birth new rivalries, and get an early look at who truly won the offseason. This one-time event will start the season in February and crown a winner in early March. The team who places first will earn their league and extra slot at Masters. From there, we're moving into the first competitive split of the year, with stacked rosters competing on LAN week in and week out. Across EMEA, APAC, and Americas, we're going to see a constant stream of interregional matches with the biggest personalities in Valorant popping off right next to their opponents. We're going to elevate how our esport is showcased and unlock the type of storytelling everyone wants to see. Our major hubs will be based around 3 cities where we will have the deep support to build the best shows possible.
Okay, so there it is. 2023, that's the layout. That's what it looks like. Paperthin, I'm going to come to you first. What are you thinking about that, right? To kick things off, 30 partner teams all in the same place to get 2023 started. It seems like an explosive start to the year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm of 2 minds about it. Like, obviously, it's a really cool event. It's a really unique event, one that we might never, ever see again. So in that respect, it's kind of cool, right? Like, you get to see something special, something unique. But at the same time, I'm a little bit disappointed because I'm not sure exactly, how that's going to all play out. I mean, you're going to have one split that's so damn important next year. I mean, I'm a little bit worried about kind of the adjustments and kind of the changes that you see. And in leagues like the LCK, for example, where they have 2 splits, there's huge changes between, how the results shake out between them. So I am a bit worried about that. I understand the reasonings, that they're doing it with, people needing visas and everything's going to be so chaotic and complicated over the course of the off season. I mean, I know in my region, I'm hearing stuff all the time about how wild the rosters are going to be and stuff like that. So I'm excited, but at the same time, I would prefer kind of just 2 splits anyway. But the kickoff tournament, hey, it's going to be a lot of fun.
And so, Anderzz, outside of the obvious, the glaring, like Paperthin said, right, is they kind of have to do this so that way everybody can get situated. Are you in that same mind where it's cool to earn that master spot for your team, but that only happens for one person? Then you jump into that incredibly important split.
I mean, it's both positive and negative. Like, that first tournament is going to be incredible, so much so that I hope it doesn't end up overshadowing, like, the next 6 months of the year. Because I think there's a very distinct likelihood that could happen. I mean, that first event is going to be, all right, we've come in from an off season. Realistically, it's going to be on a new meta patch. There'll probably be like a new map, new agent, whatever ends up happening. But it'll be a big meta shift. So everyone will be coming in clean slate. And then you just have this giant blood bowl of the 30 best teams on Earth. Like, come on. How do you follow that act? Like, genuinely.
Thunderdome.
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy. That's only really like my main concern is like, does it end up devaluing the thing that ensues? Not for the teams themselves. Obviously, they'll be very acutely aware of the impact of their ensuing international stage, but on like a global fan base level, like, am I going to care as much about like the first international split after we've seen this like crazy event go down?
Yeah, I mean, so Kaplan, obviously, some words as this gets announced. I believe this happened today that all of this kind of gets sent out. And Kaplan kind of in that same mind, right? Where obviously it's a great way to start. 30 teams, it's a lot. It's the largest we'll ever probably see. So outside of it being a huge motivator, sure, I get that. My question is, what is the... It's as tight-knit as it gets when we get out to champions, and we still see blowouts. We're going to have 30 teams joining. Right? What is the competitive integrity, Anderzz, looking like for this tournament where I love TSM? I would put a TSM jacket on right now, but I don't expect that team to compete with the Optics and the FPXs and the DRXs, the teams that we're seeing, if TSM is a partner team, right? The competitive integrity, I mean, the first couple of weeks could be blowouts.
Again. Wait, what? I'm sorry. Weltis, I hope you're in chat already. We'll see you later, but that one was for you. There is going to be a huge disparity. Like, there's no dodging that. But I think that it'll almost self-regulate in a sense. Like, yes, with 30 teams, you're going to have massive skill disparities between the top and the bottom, but you're also going to have better normalization across the mean and like that lower echelon. There's going to be a lot better of like a layering almost to it, where like you'll have a bunch of teams in the lower level, a bunch of teams in the middle level, and a bunch of teams at the top level. Yes, there's going to be intermingling there where it's like kind of just a blowout, but I think for the most part it'll still be good match quality, even more so than some of these international events, to be honest, because like pure volume will control better for variance than like regional differences can.
God damn, I love your answers, man. Anderzz gives you what you want. He gets it. It's juicy. It's a good answer every time. Paperthin, are you of the same mind? To me, I'm thinking, these tier 1 teams, I'll say, like, they don't want to play in the tier 2s, and they don't want to do the Mickey Mouses because they don't want to lose, and they don't want to look silly. How bad does it look? You're like, yes, we just got partnered. Now we're going to go play this international tournament, and we're going to get our asses kicked, right? Are you in that same mind that it ultimately is good?
It's going to be tough because a lot of these teams are going to be going through a roster royale. I mean, there's going to be tons of changes in who's playing on what teams and who's playing in what regions potentially, with some of the spicy things that I'm hearing. I mean, it's going to be all over the place. So a lot of it's going to come down to like, how prepared are they? Are those preparations actually going to be long-term, lack of variance, as Anderzz is talking about here? Like, are some of these teams going to bottom out here at this kickoff event and then, look like world beaters at the first split? So it's going to be tough to judge in some ways. I mean, I think you're going to have some of the players in the teams that we've come to expect and love, like you were talking about, Tanner, that, like the FPXs and the Optics and things like that I don't expect there's going to be a ton of change on them. But outside of those teams that are kind of at the top right now, you're going to have a wild amount of change, I think, and it's going to be really hard to necessarily judge for sure what's going on. But he is correct that because there's going to be so many games, it should become pretty obvious pretty fast. But again, coming into a new meta, new patches, it could be kind of like we saw with Fracture at Champions last year, where everybody came into it, no one really knew what the hell was going on it, and now it's played completely differently than even it was back then. So it's going to be wild, but for the viewers, it's going to be a lot of fucking fun.
I guess that's one way to look at it, right? Even if your team might lose, it still is going to be a crazy time and history, like we heard in that video, right? There's not going to be anything like it, I would imagine, unless they shuffle things up and do another kickoff tournament, something of the sort. Who knows what's going to happen? Valorant seems to kind of be carving its own path. But enough about that. Valorant holistically, although Riot are the GOATs and they are, kind of monopolizing esports as a whole, we got to talk about another GOAT, or we have to raise the question of, is it time to talk about the GOAT? And it's Ye. It's been in conversation for a long time. Anderzz, I know you have a lot to say about this, and I know you might lean the other way than the fan base. So I'm going to Paperthin first. I'm going to Paperthin first here. Is Ye the GOAT? Yes or no?
No. He's gonna, you're gonna like set me up so Anderzz makes me look bad.
No.
I already know what Anderz's opinion is on this. So for sake of argument, I'm going to take the opposite here. I think right now, in my opinion, Ye is the best player in the world. I think his aim is on another level. Of course, part of that is because of Chamber, because of the agent that he's borderline playing all the time. I think actually playing all the time. And so it suits his natural abilities. He is probably the most cracked aimer, I think, in the world right now. He's unbelievably reliable. He's so good in his first kills to first deaths, even compared to other Chambers across the tournament, other players across the tournament. So his ability to, open up favorable situations for Optic is unparalleled. He's just, you feel like the guy's just consistent once he's got, the tour de force in hand or something like that. He's putting up 2-3 kills minimum, and he's just shutting rounds down. So, so much of it comes down to, for Optic, like if he's having a good day, it just feels like they're gonna win, their matchup almost no matter what. So yeah, for me, like in just terms of at least raw mechanical skill with the current agent pool that's available, with the state of Chamber, yeah, I have to say he's the best right now.
Okay, and so Anderzz, before I let you get your piece in here, statistics is something that Paperthin brought up. Unfortunately, we have somebody who did the stats for us. It's Sideshow who actually called this out. Let's go ahead and take a look to see what he had to say.
I said that Ye was having a tournament of a lifetime. I want to go through this with you, Brent, now that we've got a timeout, right? Ye might be having the best tournament performance ever that we've ever seen. If you ended the tournament right now, he would be the MVP. And when you compare him to all the other MVPs, he would be #1 in KD, #1 in kills per round, #1 in first kill to first death ratio, almost double TenZ at Reykjavik, #1 in multi-kills per round, because every other round he's getting a multi-kill thus far, but he'd be second in ADR to himself at Berlin. This guy is making a serious case at Champions for being the GOAT, or at least the first person that you could put on a pedestal like that in the early days of Valorant.
All right.
There it is. Anderzz, the stats. What do you got?
I think Sideshow even hedged a little bit at the end there, which he's like, is he the GOAT, or at least the first person that we can start thinking about putting on a pedestal like that?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to like harshly disagree with it. I think that to disagree with this take would just be like purely contrarian and kind of bullshit, to be honest. But I think that camp of more like, he's not the GOAT, but he sure as hell is making the best argument for it right now out of everybody else. And I think my only hesitance is, like, how are you going to abstractly compare him against the other players that would be making an argument for this role? I mean, Paperthin, I'm going to pull at your heartstrings here. How the fuck do you compare Ye to Stax? In terms of individual impact on his team's win conditions, Stax has equal, if not greater than Ye's, from an IGL role, no less. Like, are you going to tell me that Ye is more entitled to the like fame of being the GOAT compared to Stax? Like, he's gotten more accolades, but he's also on a more stacked roster from a region that has a greater history in the esport to begin with. Like, Ye is undisputably the best player in his role right now in the world. If you think otherwise, like, stats objectively prove you wrong, go away. But that doesn't necessarily qualify you as a GOAT. For me, the title of a GOAT is like a simple. Like, you are a perennial juggernaut who has proven time and time again through multiple metas in multiple situations that you are just the best the world has to offer. And even though Ye has done incredibly well thus far in Valorant's history, he's done incredibly well in 2 metas where he was basically playing the same role with a very minor nuance change. Like, what happens if there's a meta where suddenly Ye doesn't have access to untradeability? If he has to play more of a divey entry duelist like a Raze, like what realistically happens to him as a player? Personally, I think he'd probably be fine, but is he still going to be putting up a result where we're like, oh, he's the best player in the universe? That's a huge question in my mind that we can't answer yet just due to the nascence of the game. And so, is he the best player in the world right now in his role? 100%. Is he the GOAT? Jury's still out.
So time will tell is ultimately kind of what we're getting at.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I need more. Like, GOAT is a very, very serious title to give someone when a game's been out for two years and change.
And I think he also has the benefit of having a phenomenal IGL on his team right now, right? Like, FNS has just a really good mind for the game. I mean, everybody's talked about it a lot, but he has incredible mid-rounding. He really is good on the fly, good off the cuff. like some of the ways that I see him maneuver the team, especially with like, I think back to like there was a round on Haven where he like called an audible and they pushed through garage and pushed through the garage window because he like felt a weakness in a team and just things like that. Like some of those intangibles that you're not going to see on the scoreboard as well. That, you know, obviously Ye's going to open up some space for you potentially, but also, you know, the success that Optic is able to carry to give Ye the continued opportunities based on the way that FNS leads that team also, I think, adds to some of that. But that's like any team game, right? Like anything, any sports related game. I mean, you know, you have great coaches, you have great staff, all of that funnels into, you know, the GOAT. But yeah, absolutely. Anderzz is correct. Like we just don't have enough time yet to really start thinking about somebody in that echelon.
So, okay, so now, Anderzz, I'll come to you with this. GOAT, obviously, like you said, very early, couple of years. If he's not the GOAT, is he the GOFT, the greatest of the first 2 years? The greatest of the first 2 years that we've seen before we get into international.
Like, again, like the only caveat I would put on that is I'm always going to be a little bit of like a stickler for the, well, how the hell are you going to do cross-roll comparisons? And so, like, Ye, I would not even necessarily say that he's the greatest of the first 2 years of the game. I think that in his role, he is absolutely the greatest of the first 2 years. But like, again, how are you going to compare him against world-class IGLs that have consistently put up results? Like, FNS probably has a fair argument to claim that throne compared to Ye, which sounds ludicrous. I mean, if you're a stat Steven, like, you're just going to laugh at me with that take. But like, there's absolutely merit to that argument. I would say that a large amount of Ye's success is off of the fact that FNS has such a solid claim to that throne. And then again, you have people like Stacks, you have people like Boaster that even though they haven't lifted a trophy, how consistently have they performed at a world-class level? He even frags like a fucking maniac. Like, there are people that aren't gonna put up these like, oh, it's besting like 10s at Reykjavik level frag numbers. Like that's not gonna happen. But this is a game where support roles exist and they're just as important as the primary fragging ones. So Ye is the best in his role, and I would be hard pressed to give him a title that stretches beyond that. And I honestly, like, this is a really sort of weird way to look at it. I honestly think that giving a hard title of just like a blanket GOAT in this game is kind of just silly. I don't think that will ever exist. I think a GOAT on a role by role basis is probably more realistic.
Okay, so like essentially we're saying that you want Ye on your all-star team when you create one. And when we get down to the regional all-star team, Ye needs to be on that. So Ye obviously for the first 2 years has had a good run. We know a lot of things are going to be changing upcoming, but we'll have to see, you know, kind of how all that plays out to keep this conversation going. But another team, or rather not just a player that's having a good run, Paperthin, hey, top 4, DRX, baby. We're making it. They don't play today. Yeah, this is it. It's DRX. I don't know if Achilleos
I got my
watching.
flag ready. I'm ready, man.
Yeah, Achilleos has been on the DRX hype train as well. I know you two are close. So talk to us about this DRX team and what do you think for the rest of this Champions run, man?
So there's a lot going on here. I mean, so first of all, I think the biggest thing that everybody's going to be looking at is the mental like capacity of this team. And obviously shifting the IGL role back to Stacks from Zest has proved to be the correct decision. And even though Zest was a solid IGL, he had decent ideas. They were still running into similar problems where they weren't able to be creative on the fly. And there was some attempted addressing of that during stage 2 by Termi, the coach, of not taking timeouts during VCT Korea to try to force adaptation from his team. And it didn't quite work out as well as they would have liked going into Copenhagen. So now you shift to Stacks as the IGL. And he is a much better mid-round IGL. He comes up with interesting strategies on the fly, round to round. You see tremendous variance, particularly on this map. You're seeing here Fracture, Ascent as well. I think he does a really good job of, you know, making sure that no 2 rounds really look the same. Now, there still are some problem maps, in my opinion, particularly as we saw with Icebox against Fnatic. But that's the mental thing is the first part of it. The second part of it is, well, okay, let me build on the mental part a little bit more. Also, some of the players here. Buzz in particular seems to be much more mature this event. He's really starting to come into his own. Like, I was talking with the DRX staff, like we were watching Copenhagen together and we all just knew right away Buzz was struggling. We could tell when he walked into that last match against FPX that he was mentally not there. We could just tell by his body language. Now he doesn't have that problem. He seems confident, he seems focused, and moving him back onto the jet probably gives him some confidence as well. RB seems to be a little bit more comfortable, even though he's asked to play more of a support role more often. His Neon is quite good, so that opens up some space for them on Fracture. Everybody, jokes online that, RB's been playing Apex or something. Well, that's actually true. I actually found this out from the TRX staff that RB does play a lot of Apex, actually. So he's able to kind of utilize that natural slide, the momentum, and the movement of the agent very, very effectively. So, and everything's just better for them. I think one of the other funny things is that quietly, Mako, we call him the gentle giant, this guy who's typically very soft-spoken, has actually kind of found a role as sort of a support leader mentally for this team, where if things start to snowball, if the team starts to have some problems, Mako will actually kind of come in and just go, hey guys, it's okay. It's okay. Let's calm down. And you'll see him sometimes on the camera kind of looking around, and you can see he'll have some short but impactful words to say to his team.
That's important, right? To keep things going. I think it's going to be especially important, right? To keep this short, because I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit later. Paperthin, how do you feel about now that they're getting this rematch against FPX? Is DRX that team that is going to do well in the rematch and be able to take this, or can they stop this lower run from FPX?
It's going to be tough, and I think right now, like especially like after some of the things that happened last night, I think FPX is going to be in kind of an FU mode where they're really wanting to prove themselves. They're really going to be in a good mental state, I think, in terms of just coming into this match brimming with a lot of, we want to show you, we want to prove to you, like that, we feel slighted. And, I think I saw this personally. I felt like this with Optic at the first Masters in Iceland this year, that they had that mentality of, people were starting to hate on them on social media and things, and they took that, they internalized it, and they projected it into the game. And I'm worried with that with FPX, because not only is it a rematch, which often has been difficult for teams to win their rematches throughout all of Valorant history, but also just I think they're in a good headspace. So absolutely, I'm happy for DRX. I think they're playing the best they've ever been. I think their mentality's in the best space it's ever been. I think the roles are in their best possible position. But I don't know, with the way that this FPX team is going to come into this next match, what it's going to look like. I have confidence that they're going to make a game of it, but we'll see.
Yeah, we will see. Anderzz, I'm going to give you now kind of your maybe claim. Maybe you're not a DRX fan, maybe an FPX fan, but how do you feel about, I guess, this DRX team, if we can lean a little bit more on this, because they just reached top 4. This is the best that they've done in an international event. They are going into a really tough rematch. What are your thoughts about them?
So I am the classic hater who's secretly the biggest fan on earth. Okay. Like that is my stance on DRX. I flame the shit out of them on socials, and I'm like, oh, they're choke artists, but it's just because I want them to succeed. I mean, I come from playing League of Legends for 11 years. Like my fandom for the Korean region is very, very deep seated. I have utmost respect for the way that they approach esports. I always will. And so I've wanted Korea to succeed in Valorant since day zero. The fact that they're finally finding it and getting over this mental hump of as soon as they lose something, they just fizzle out, makes me so happy. I do not have words for it. That said, I think that they're still playing a little bit of catch up compared to the absolute best teams in the world. And to Paperthin's point, like, Anderzz is in full on, I'm going to kill everybody mode. Yeah, like, I doubt that there is going to be a time at any point in Valorant's past or future where I would less want to play against Anderzz than right now. So, good luck.
Yeah, that is true. Anderzz, that entire team, actually. We'll get to all that later. We'll get to all that later. We'll talk about FPX later. But shout outs DRX, and obviously we hope to see them continue to do well, especially Paperthin over here. But before we jump into our next segment, we got to thank our friends over at Juke.gg. You guys know that they always put us on as well. And if you guys aren't by now, you guys should have downloaded the Juke app on your cell phones. Please go look to do that. You can do it on the Apple Store or the Google Play Store. And if you're unfamiliar with what Juke is, it's a newly launched social media platform that provides hardcore and casual fans. So if you're not too crazy into it, you can still have a home here to follow, discuss, and connect with like-minded fans in a toxic-free environment thanks to their strict anti-toxicity stance. And we know that across social media platforms, things can get weird. So Juke is out here making sure it's a safe place for you guys to actually have your opinions, to share your opinions, and then to go back and forth and maybe come out with something new, or maybe come out with a different opinion. And it also has, as you see here on your screen, favorite games. You can jump on in. It's got an aggregated news feed, which is curated based off of your interests. So you guys are here, probably familiar with Valorant. That's going to be one of your choices. But as Anderzz was saying, League of Legends, if if you're a DRX fan, you're probably following them across the board, right? If you're a TSM fan, you're probably following them across the board. And those guys play multiple different games, which you can select here to make sure that you're finding the news there. So shout out Juke, always putting us on. And again, if you're not in there, you need to get in there. For everything esports, guys, it helps you keep up. I get the alerts all the time, and it really I'm looking, and I'll even hit up Ian. I'm like, Ian, did you see this? And he's like, yeah, I already got it. Because Ian is always on top of it. Ian gets the news before everybody else. Now, we can jump into our next segment. It's, well, you guys are watching, and around the world, a lot of people watched. And we had questions in a previous episode of, is just random spurts of viewership good or bad, or what does that mean? And how are we looking kind of across the board? Well, these are the stats between the Valorant Champions 21, opening things up in the group stage, and Valorant Champions 2022. Anderzz, these numbers are obviously better than what we saw last year. Is there anything that speaks to you about like what these numbers can mean, or why we're seeing numbers continue to grow in Valorant?
So I think that there's two things I want to highlight here. One of them is like a really minor asterisk, and that's first, look at these champions numbers. They're already growing, and like that's you sort of shift over to look at which teams are playing. You've got Paperthin and EDG. Paperthin, APAC, obviously a region that has sort of been rapidly arising to international acclaim, and so now that region is getting more and more reason to watch these international events, and so it's a growth market for the game. And China, where this is their first event, and they're putting up numbers that are surpassing previous years with massive fan-based teams like Sentinels and Crew. If this is what the Chinese fan base of this game brings to the first event that their team has ever participated in, imagine what this is going to be 6 months down the road, 12 months down the road. Like, this to me is saying, oh yeah, we've surpassed last year, but this is literally a drop in the bucket of where we're headed.
Yeah, and Paperthin, we're seeing, so obviously the fans that came to watch day one, you see that number's a bit higher than everything else, but the rest of the games, right, Zeta and Loud, Liquid and PRX, these numbers are just right around the corner from the peak that we saw on day one.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing that this truly is a global phenomenon. I mean, it's not just, obviously it's huge in Asia. This is one of the biggest games in Asia overall right now. I mean, you see it all the time where people are posting about the Korean PC Bong numbers, even where those are starting to go up quite significantly. But it's not just Korea. I mean, Japan, China, Southeast Asia, all of it, it's getting huge. This is a super popular game. And that's breeding into the other regions. Like, everybody is so competitive. Everybody wants their region, their team to be the best. And, everybody wants to see what they're capable of. So, yeah, bringing China into the mix is certainly going to just naturally boost your numbers. It is a massive region for esports, just maybe the biggest. And so all of that combined is showing us that this has tons of staying power. It has, tons of potential. And, that's why we all love it. That's why we're all here.
And I think the only thing missing from having even more viewership is we just need more history. I think about it when I watch League of Legends. I think, man, these two teams, even watching the Worlds draw, I'm just like, oh, great, Cloud9, Group A, Group of Death. But there's just so much history to it. So I'm excited to see where we go as this history continues, especially that we are jumping into these inter-regional leagues, LA, Berlin, Seoul, all that good stuff. Now, we talked about a player who was in the running of GOAT. And the agent that he plays mostly is one that a lot of people have issues with, that agent being Chamber. Now, Anderzz, Chamber got nerfed, right?
Ish. Nerfed-ish.
Yeah.
It's one of those classic, we're going to address everything other than the thing that's actually the problem. I think that you might as well have not done any of these balance changes other than the one that decreased the radius of his TPs. Like, literally everything else in there is pretty moot, I'm going to be honest. I wish that you could just magically create Monte Carlo simulated results of what would have happened if we had done a patch where the only thing they changed was the TP radius, and I would wager it would have more or less had the same net effect on his win rate and his pick rates. He was nerfed, wasn't actually nerfed, is the long and short of it.
So is this the era of Chamber, Paperthin, and is it going to prolong, do you think, or do you think it's going to be as short as the era of Sentinels in North America?
Yeah, I think Chambers got more staying power. Sorry, Sentinels fans, but I think Chambers got a little bit. I mean, look, it's just too disgusting what you can do with not just the tour de force. Of course, everybody's going to watch that. Those amazing, highlight clips you're able to put up with it. But it's the headhunter. The headhunter is so disgusting. I mean, it's a mini Marshall, right? That's the way people talk about it, and it truly is. I mean, the way that you can just shut down rounds, you can get these ecos out that you're not really supposed to be able to. The way that you can funk with the economy. You're seeing this all over the place now, where teams are able to cut a lot of funds. You're getting into these weird, extra buy rounds that maybe you shouldn't be able to have. That's up for debate, I suppose. But it's a lot of things that he brings to the table outside of just the TP that are also really problematic. I mean, of course, the TP is the get out of the jail free card that everybody talks about and is super important for players like EA, but also the ability to kind of cut economy and to cut corners and to also have high impact in rounds where maybe you shouldn't be able to have as high of impact. Arguably, it's really scary. It's a nasty agent, and unless you fundamentally, I think, change the headhunter and a little bit of the tour de force, you're still gonna have the same problems.
Yeah, so, I mean, Anderzz, I'll come to you with this one. Maybe Paperthin, you can chime in too. But what is, how bad would it look to just kind of, hey, take backsies on kind of just an agent as a whole, right? Like, what can they do to Chamber or even that headhunter? Is it a damage thing, right? Because I think obviously the fire rate on it is nice and the economy about it is nice, but I think everybody loves the fact that the headhunter is a one shot to the head, like in other tactical shooters, like in Counter-Strike, right? Where the Sheriff does not do that. So that's obviously a huge talking point. If you take that away, does that completely gut Chamber, Anderzz?
No. So here's my really, I don't know if this is a hot take. This is literally me off the cuff. I thought of this in the last 45 seconds. It is completely half-baked. I do not stick to this whatsoever. Do not hold me to it. And by that, I fully expect Ian and production to hold me to it. Basically, what I think you got to do is you have to, first of all, gut his untradeability mechanic. I've said it before. I'll say it again. This is attack FPS. Untradeability just straight up shouldn't exist in this game. It's always going to be a trouble point for balance. It's always going to be unhealthy for the game at a peak competitive level. The whole premise of attack FPS is that you're playing as a team unit to create advantageous scenarios where you can trade your teammates. This fundamentally breaks that premise. It is bad for the game. Get it the fuck out. Like, I will always stick to my guns on that, plain and simple. I think that Jet's untradeability moved in a fairly healthy direction where they basically said, yeah, you can use it as untradeability, but it's going to be really suboptimal. We've sort of created an avenue for it where it's mostly wanted to be used as a dive mechanism where you have to queue it up and then use it on an exec. That's great. That's probably as untradeable a mechanic as I will ever want to see in this game. But more to the other point where you're looking at his damage, I think Tour de Force's fire rate is the biggest issue with that gun. I think if you nerf the fire rate, suddenly everyone's okay with it. And the Headhunter, the issue is that right now, it's not... I think during the design process, the intent was to make it more or less a budget, slightly superior version of a Sheriff, maybe bridging a little bit of the gap towards a Marshal, and in reality what it is it's a budget Guardian. Yeah. That's the problem. Like, they missed the mark by 1,100 credits worth of gun value. And so you need to dial that back in a way that I don't think necessarily hits the ability. You can leave the ability as is, but you need to make it more price reflective. And I think the way to do that is make it so that his bullets don't carry over round to round. Make it a flat investment that's a really high cost ability. Make it like a 500 credit paranoia. Give him 4 bullets, and those are use on the round. You have to buy into your Headhunter 4 bullets every single round, 500 credits. And I guarantee you that will normalize the perception of that ability so fast you'll get whiplash.
Okay, that's what it is. Paperthin, how do we end this era of Chamber? Do you have any ideas on what could kind of make it, I guess, just more digestible? Because right now Chamber is he just fists down your throat. That's what you get.
Yeah, I mean, I think Anderzz is hitting on so many good points here, right? Like, it's the untradeability, it's the damage that you're able to output for relatively low cost. And so I think, maybe you could do something with the rendezvous where it's like the Jet, where you have to have a wind up time, where you have to, this is again off the cuff. I took Tanner's like Jay, and I'm smoking it myself. So like, I mean, I think like something like that, right? Like where there has to be some kind of, you can use the rendezvous, and it can be, an escape, but you have to time it. You have to, so that way you can bait it out. There has to be some kind of, like Anderzz is talking about, tradability here. So you could do it with like the Jet Dash, where, yes, you can use it as an execute, But sometimes you have to risk it. Sometimes for the biscuit, right? You have to go up and hold an angle with, like, let's say if an op is a jet and you're gonna time your dash because you think they might come. Oops, they never come. Well, now your dash is gone. You guessed wrong, and the opponent baited out that utility. Things like that, maybe stuff to look at. But right now, yeah, Chamber is just absolutely nuts. And you see it at the top level of play that with players who are outrageously accurate, they're able to even further put that value to use.
My favorite part about this segment is not talking about how we can nerf Chamber, although I do love that. It is the different takes and both the directions that we went on Anderzz saying half baked. That is my favorite part of that segment. Now, so things obviously Chamber creates. Well, we all know how we feel about Chamber, and people feel certain ways about certain things. And we had a couple of guys on a couple of NA teams that were going back and forth. And those couple of guys are Def and Psycho in their match against Optic. Let's see what they had to say about maybe some abusing.
No, I think the only mind game that Optic use are finding ways to tech pause during pretty big rounds or before big rounds. Seems like every time we play them guys, there's a tech pause. Obviously, like a lot of the stuff is out of their hands and whatever, but very unfortunate, but also pretty sucky for a team that's pretty momentum based and we want to get rolling, and every other round we have to wait for 30 minutes.
I think it's a gap in the rule set that needs to be addressed by Riot specifically, and I'll be having conversations with them about it after the fact. But it's no different when we play them online to when we play them here on the stage. It's tech pause when it's 12-11, tech pause after we get a win, tech pause after I call attack timeout and go on a 60-second spiel about what we're about to do. And it's intentional, and in my eyes, it's an abuse of the rule set, and I think that it should be fixed.
No, there is no intention to like screw them over or anything. The PC was just actually not working well.
You can ask the referee as well.
Riot wouldn't allow that to happen. Anyways.
Yeah, we had an admin looking at it, and he's like, yeah, that's pretty bad. And one of the rounds, I think the very last tech pause was the one we won, and he somehow got like
I was playing through it.
Yeah,
I had it. Yeah, he was still stuttering and playing through it.
Insane 3K. He's like, I just killed these guys stuttering.
So, I said that. We don't need a cheat to beat them. Yeah, I assure you. Come on now.
We don't need to cheat to beat them.
Not wrong.
And unfortunately, we don't get that rematch. Anderzz, I know you had a lot to say about this, though, right? Kind of having that perspective of coach for players and what the tech pauses could be and what they can't be and how they can abuse. So I'll let you kind of just, this is your baby right here.
It's a lose-lose all around because, like, do I think Optic is, like, doing this in an underhanded way? Fuck no. Like, I'm always going to give those guys the benefit of the doubt. They're competitors. They want to win fair and square, and they've done so enough that they don't need these underhanded bullshit tricks to get the job done. However, in the absence of me being in that optimistic mindset, is it possible for them to abuse these tech pauses even in the event that the computer is performing incorrectly? Absolutely. Frame a scenario for you. I'm a team. We are stringing rounds like crazy. We've got crazy momentum. One of my guys has 40 FPS lower than he's supposed to. Am I really going to break our momentum right now to get that problem fixed? Absolutely fucking not. We're sending it. Like, we're playing through that every single time. And you just heard in the Optic interview, they played through it. Like, that is absolutely a doable thing, and if your team has momentum, you're going to do it. But what happens if suddenly we lose that momentum and we're in the same situation? Fuck it. Tech. Call the tech. Like, there's no way to sort of control for that. The only way that you can conceivably control for that, and hopefully this is the sort of conversation that Psycho was having with Riot admins, is you can't create a situation where you're relying on the players to self-report these FPS issues, these performance problems. You need to have active monitoring on the computers, and you need to have set, all right, if performance metric X goes below like Y threshold, hard stop. We switch out the PC. We call it tech. It's an automated process essentially, and that's what sort of dictates everything. That's the only way to really control for that sort of situation.
Yeah, he hit the nail on the head. I mean, of what I was thinking. Like,
I think we lost Tanner.
Oh, yeah, maybe we lost Tanner. Well,
that's
anyway,
more or less where we're going. Paperthin, I'm curious.
You literally read my
on
mind,
your
dude.
end. Like,
you did it again, man. Like,
do you get this sort of tech pause issue super frequently in Korea? Is this like, is this something that's sort of an NA phenomenon, or
no?
Am I out on a limb here?
We've had our fair share of tech pauses in Korea. They're usually sound related. In Korea, at the very least, like they're pretty much just so like someone can't hear someone else in their voice chat, or maybe the headphones went a little wonky and they gotta plug them in, unplug them in, or something like that, is typically what we're seeing. But I wanted to say, you actually read my mind with like having some kind of implementation of a system in place where Riot is actively monitoring the situation for all the players' PCs, and like you said, if something starts to go haywire, if the frames per second drop or whatever have you, it's immediately addressed, no matter what. So that way you can't have these situations like you're talking about, where if you've got a minor problem or a problem that you can play through, that you don't fix it until you feel like maybe it's affecting your play enough that it's worth stopping for. So absolutely, it's something that Riot needs to be proactive on going forward, to make sure that assuming that maybe there is potential for abuse of this, you try to limit it as much as possible. And I think that's hopefully something that we're going to be seeing in the future. But typically, at least in Korea, like, our tech pauses were almost always sound related. Almost always. We had very few that were due to performance issues on the PCs or anything like that. I think we're still missing our boy Tanner, dude.
Yeah, so
least I can't hear him.
heat of the moment, right? We're heat of the moment for basically, well, everybody on XSET, obviously after a loss, they get asked these questions and they're feeling some kind of way. They're also the bad guys. But they step forward afterwards, realizing, exactly this, right? I always own up to my mistakes, and to react like that, unacceptable. We should have addressed what we thought were, Optic abusing these technical pauses with Riot, and maybe, gone through those channels, versus just blurting that out, no matter how you feel in that interview or in that post game. And even it says here, right? You don't vent after the game, especially to the media when they're going to put it everywhere. I know that the rest of the XSET guys were also feeling this way. I would have loved to see that maybe they just stick to the bad guy thing, and Psycho's just like, yeah, these guys are cheating. And I think I might actually be. I needed a tech pause a second ago. I think I might be back in the Discord, so hopefully you guys can hear me in here, as I've just been kind of
got you now
chatting through the remix. Okay, cool. Everybody's got me. All right, sweet. Discord let me down. It was a comms issue, but we're back. That's what's happening with Optic. Yeah, they apologized. They said, hey, we're sorry. But although, so Psycho, kind of same thing. Psycho talked to Riot.
I cannot.
They say, hey, yeah, there is issues. Obviously, there is that underline, right, Anderzz, that sure, there might always be issues, but when you choose to kind of call that issue is, up to you realistically, and how you can kind of play that. Not to say that Optic are doing that, but Paperthin for this. Unfortunately, I didn't hear your kind of thoughts right after Anderzz was speaking there, but this is obviously a bad look, right? To jump into this press conference and to kind of just blurt it out, right? How many times can you do that in these press conferences and then apologize on Twitter before it becomes, seemingly just unokay?
Yeah, I mean, these are things that need to be addressed behind the scenes first, or at least attempted to be. I don't know if they have or not, but no matter how upset or angry you are, you need to just, deal with it. Try to deal with it behind the scenes before you start making accusations. I get you're angry. You just lost an incredibly tough match at one of the biggest events of the year. The stakes are so high. I mean, you're seeing this with XSET and other teams, right, where things start to go wrong in one way or another. And then, obviously that raises the tensions. It's the biggest event of the year. The tensions are going to be through the roof. So I get it. It's hard, but you still need to have some kind of level of professionality. And that means going through the proper channels first, right? Like, you can't just, start trying to whistleblow when you don't have the evidence to go forward to try to make a case until you've got, some kind of substantial thing. Like, you've watched all of Optic's matches and you've said, hey, they take 90% of their tech pauses at crucial points in the match. Like, for example, I just quickly tried to go back and watch some of Optic's matches during this event real quick to see when their tech pauses went. Well, the only one I could find that it was against Liquid, it was when they were up 10-2, and I don't know whose tech pause it was or not. I was just scrolling through the VODs real quick just to see when their tech pauses. So I don't feel like this was the moment to do this. Their criticisms or their concerns are potentially valid, but this wasn't the right format, the right way to go about it. I get it, you're angry, but hey, sometimes you just got to step back and, if you do things a little bit more methodically and thoughtfully.
Yeah, definitely have to be thinking about what you're saying and where you're saying it, obviously. And Guys, we're all gamers, okay? If they're better than you and they beat you, they're probably cheating. That's just how it is. Which leads us into our next segment, right? Of hopefully somebody in chat, or maybe even you guys on the desk here, you guys can, you're on my side with this one, but I swear there are more cheaters now in Valorant that are popping up all over the place than I have ever seen in the history of Valorant. For the first time ever the other day, not only did I see a Riot employee say, I ran into somebody who was testing his cheats in deathmatch and I had to ban him. Sad that he ran into me. But I also ran into a cheater the other day. We had a Jet just dominate us and get banned immediately. It wasn't this Jet that was dropping 50 bombs in diamond lobbies. Or maybe it was this Jet, actually. I don't remember the player's name, but hackers in Valorant, Paperthin. I don't know if you've experienced it or seen kind of any of this, but it's through the roof, it feels.
Hey man, like, look, I come from PUBG originally. This one just cracks me up. I mean, the giant gun just spinning, just obliterating people, just absolutely. I mean, for comedy's sake, this is great. But look, I come from the realm of PUBG, man. Like, I'm like that meme with like the dude with the noose around his neck, and he's like, "Oh, first time." Like, it was, you know, the PUBG is notorious for cheaters, and obviously Valorant has tried some things from the rip to try to limit the scope of what cheaters can and can't do. But this is going to be the life cycle of any popular game, and the more popular it gets, the more there's going to want to be cheaters. And I want to tell you guys something in particular that is a problem, is that hackers can profit. Like, people can make hacks that they make money from. And so what you have is industries that have grown in some countries where the laws aren't quite as strict, where that you're able to make these companies that are rather large, that are rather effective, and you know, people are employed to make these hacks, and you know, they're going to get better and better, more sophisticated over time. I can tell you, for example, that there was a company in China that up until recently had been making hacks, and the company itself hired or had more employees than PUBG Corp did. This just as a hacking company, a company that made hackers, had more employees than a giant, you know, software developer. So this is clearly a huge problem. But if you want my honest opinion, this needs to be addressed fundamentally on a government level. You can't stop this as a company. Riot, no matter who they are, I don't care how big your company is, you cannot stop this. It has to be stopped globally, internationally, with laws. That's the only way it's going to really start to be able to be leveled out.
Anderzz, any thoughts or experiences?
I more or less agree with that take. I get to take the funny non-stance of, I never actually play the game, so it doesn't bother me that much. W. But yeah, I mean, like, some of these clips are memeable. I mean, you've got fuckers Borpa spinning around mid on Ascent, just auto headshotting everybody. Like,
yeah,
cheats are going to be somewhat cyclical. There's always going to be cheat dev trying to produce something else. The dev is never going to be able to keep up perfectly, so you just have to have realistic expectations about that. The best that they can do is try to play catch up as soon as a new cheat wave comes through. But sort of like Paperthin was saying, if we ever want to like truly address it, it would have to be something really extreme at a government level. And at a certain point, I don't think that's really realistic, so I doubt it'll ever happen.
Yeah, well, you know, esports is on the come up, so maybe people start to take it more seriously, or governments start to take it more seriously. Either way, I guess it kind of just sucks. This is a segment that I just thought, just because I had seen it kind of all over the timeline, and Riot did their best for as long as they could, or as long as they could, rather, and now they have to try their best again to get the big gun spinning sages out of them.
They've done better than most. They've done better than most.
Yeah, 100%. I will. Yeah, 100%. And I think I saw some Twitter takes the same way, that it was, you know, I've seen in the last 3 months more than I had the last 2 years. So a good run for Vanguard, although it does kind of just grab your computer by the brain and it massages your computer's brain. It's in there. It's in there deep. So we've got a bit more time here on our news segment, and we've got probably one of the most controversial, one of the longest segments we could talk about forever. It's not cheating. It's not actual insects. It's bugs in video games. And it's this turret bug that I just broke my pen, and I'm so sad about it. But it's this turret bug right here. This was the turret shot heard around the world here, Paperthin.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is kind of funny to me because this literally happened at about 5:30 a.m. Korean time as I was laying in bed trying to go to sleep. And I saw it right away. And when I do play Valorant, my main agent is Killjoy or Sage. Those are the two I like to play the most. So I kind of knew about this turret bug. I didn't fully understand that it was quite as wild as this at times, because I've seen it more like on Ascent, like if you put a turret at like the platform outside of market on B, right, to cover that door. For example, it'll sometimes like track people into the walls, like where it's initially aimed, and I've seen it do wonky stuff like that. So I saw this, I knew it right away. I'm like, oh yeah, it lost its targeting, so it switched back in the middle of firing. I've seen that, but in the heat of the moment here, obviously this caused confusion for XSET, and I understand that you need to be aware of these kind of things. That as players, there should be some kind of mental preparation for these sorts of situations. And I know Anderzz is going to have other things to say about it, but I do understand the confusion that it caused. I saw it right away. I knew it right away. I knew it was going to be all over Twitter. I did not expect the reaction afterwards from Riot, because I went right to bed. I literally did not watch the follow-up because of this situation.
Well, you know, it's a good thing that you went right to bed, because we had 10-minute timer with Stinger and 10-minute timer with Stinger and 10 minutes for a good hour and a half. We were waiting around, so you would have been up all night to see the conclusion of that game. Obviously that sucks, Anderzz, right? The bug sucks, but outside of kind of what it meant for that game specifically and the run back and all that stuff, I think we've got an interview later, but there's huge implications as to, you know, what this singular round run back means for the competitive integrity of Valorant, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, I almost feel like I have to apologize ahead of time, because, like, I feel like I always end up the villain in these scenarios where it's like, oh, a controversial thing happens. I take really aggressive, hardline take, demanding accountability when nobody else has the balls to do it. My bad. Like,
you're the devil on the shoulder. I'm the angel. You go ahead.
Someone's got to fucking do it. Someone has to fucking do it, and nobody else is doing it. So you know what? I'll be the asshole. Like, at the end of the day, this is completely unacceptable. There were two appropriate ways to handle this situation. Neither of them were taken. And it all stems from, what are we actually going to call a bug? This Killjoy turret interaction is 100% recreatable, 100% predictable for someone who knows how the interaction works, and has been in the game for longer than it hasn't been in the game. At what point are we really going to label this a bug? If we go through this step by step, all right, turret pings onto Angel, he breaks the LOS. When a person jiggles and breaks the LOS of a Killjoy turret, it fires forward. He then re-enters the LOS, gets hit once, but then, because of the way that XSET has placed their turret, leaves the 180-degree vision cone of the turret, resetting it back to center again. I can literally go step by step as someone who understands the game and know exactly how this happened, why it happened, and know that it would happen every single time I was in this situation. Yes, is this a particularly egregious example where the turret resetting seems a little bit crazy? Yes, but here's a really fucking hot take for you. It's because of the closed angle that XSET's turret is on. If they had done a more open turret to accommodate for the fact that turret resets on jiggles, it wouldn't have been able to be passed, and that third bullet would have actually hit Angel there. And the whole situation doesn't happen. So at what point are we like, you as a team need to understand that bugs, in heavy quotes, have been in the game for like a year plus, and need to play around them. I as a coach, I've played around that bug repeatedly. There are multiple instances on maps where, like, if you don't set your turret in a way that's insulated against jiggles, it's useless. You're just never going to get real info from it. Like, you've got to take advantage of the 180-degree vision cone, and a lot of the time it's correct to literally point your turret not at the point that you're trying to get info from, so that if it resets, it fires into no man's land, and you know that it's false info based off of your turret angle. And, like, this is me, like, fucking playing 4D chess and being like, oh, you gotta play around it in all these crazy ways, blah, 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 blah. And you can just be like, well, it's a bug. We shouldn't have to do that. It's been in the game for longer than it hasn't been. At what point does it stop being a bug and start being a feature, and is something that, like, we just accept as being normal? And on Riot's end, if you prioritize this bug so low in the hierarchy in terms of how impactful the game it is, that you haven't fixed it in that period of time, why are you enforcing it as a bug? I see one of two situations. I'm going to circle back to that one of two things. In one situation, you say this has been in the game for longer than it hasn't. It is no longer considered a bug. The expectation is that everyone knows what it is and everyone works about it. We've deemed it not impactful enough to require resets, require like rollbacks, require bans, etc., etc. Option two, this is big enough that it's going to cause round warping impact. We have to blanket ban the agent. Those are your two options. Anything in between is flip-floppy subjective bullshit, and you're setting a bad precedent. We didn't do either of those.
No, we didn't. Yeah, and Paperthin, I want to let you get it because I gave you the, kind of what happened, and you ended up going to bed. But in terms of competitive integrity, do you have any extra thoughts to kind of topple over Anders' big tower of thoughts?
No, I don't think he's wrong. I mean, I literally went to bed because I thought it was over. I'm like, well, that bug, it happens. I mean, I've seen it. I play Killjoy all the time. I've seen it. I know it happens. And I'm like, as soon as I saw it, I knew exactly what happened. I mean, credit to the observers here. They gave us a great angle. I think it was Yeti who gave us that one. And big round of applause for that.
Yes.
It led to one of the most controversial moments. I mean, if you want to talk about fueling the drama of this event, he may have been the biggest factor so far. But look, I went to bed because I thought it was a done issue. I'm like, well, yeah, that happens. I mean, it sucks. The first bullet, it looks like it starts when it was facing heaven, and then it slings back and fires one, and then fires one in heaven and fires back. So I think I don't think you can overturn that round. I don't appreciate that we did that. I would have rather just, because I don't think XSET was particularly mad about it. You saw it after the fact that they came out and said that we weren't the ones that were approached about it. Riot came to us and said they wanted to replay it. And of course you're going to as XSET. You can't turn down that opportunity. You just can't. I don't care what anyone says. You don't turn that down. But at the same time, it did affect the round. I mean, you could clearly see that in the heat of the moment. I think it was Def who was playing KO there, right? Was completely bamboozled by it. Like, he was watching heaven. And so in that sense, it did completely potentially change the landscape of a winnable round for XSET. But still, I don't think that one is egregious enough that it's worth replaying the whole thing for. Just like Anderzz said, it's something that's been around. Anybody who's played Killjoy knows it's there. You've seen it because you've tried placing your turret at funky angles just to see what happens, at the very least. And from an optics standpoint, I kind of get what Riot is thinking here, where they say, oh my God, this bug in a crucial round, in a high intensity moment, in a map 3 of a deciding game of a potential winner of this event, whether it be XSET or FPX who wins that match, could still go on to the finals and win the whole thing one way or another. We need to replay it for what they, in their minds, what is optics, to show that, okay, we take these bugs seriously. We're going to make sure we try to keep in competitive integrity, but at the same time, they lose in that because it just the situation that Anderzz described is kind of counterintuitive to what they're probably thinking in their minds.
Yeah, and then it sets that precedence again of, is it only that one round that matters? Because it was the last round of the game. That's the only bug that you run back versus all of the other bugs that are happening. In round 7 of the game. And so yeah, definitely a sticky situation. I know people in chat were asking who to blame. Actually, before I get to this, because I'm going to jump into the next thing, Anderzz, it looked like you had something you want to say.
Yeah. So this is sort of the thing that we all have to keep in mind to close the loop on this is, where the fuck do we go from here? Because there are active bugs that fall under the exact same category as this Killjoy one, where it's been a long-lived bug that's well known to every coach, every analyst, is well known to Riot. They've publicly acknowledged it. It's not on a bug and exploit list. It's not something that's player initiated. It's something that's fairly random in instantiation. Like the KO knives is the perfect example. The chamber teleports that occasionally give the team that see the chamber info of where he's teleported. Are we just going to reset rounds every single time one of those two bugs happens for the rest of this event?
How about that Viper wall or in the tournament?
So, I mean, that Viper wall, at least, that's something that's player initiated. I can control whether or not my Viper wall does that. The chamber TP, no control over that. KO knife,
right, that's true.
No control over that. So are we just hard resetting every single time one of those happens from here on out? Because that's what this decision sets as precedent. Or are we going to default to the other mode that I said, which is are we just going to be like, those bugs have been around for fucking ever? Everyone knows that they're there. It's something that you're expected to play around. And it's something that you as a coach and as a team are opting into as a risk when you select the agent that it involves. Plain and simple.
I think part of this might stem from some of the bug issues they've had in League of Legends that have resulted in all kinds of problems, right? Like, they just had one in the LCK in the previous split where, a player had a problem and it wasn't reported fast enough or something. I don't know the exact details. I'm not going to lie. I don't pay a ton of attention to League of Legends, but I know there was an issue there, and I think they're super concerned about the PR. They're super concerned about the optics.
Right.
I get it. I do. But they need to have plans ahead of time instead of these blanket statements of we can rerun rounds whenever we feel like it if we felt like there was a bug.
Yeah.
That's a dangerous precedent to set, and you got to be really careful with that. Obviously, there can be game-breaking bugs that occur out of nowhere that no one knew about, but like you're saying, Anderzz, people knew about this one. This isn't a game-breaking one. This is one that just was a bit unfortunate. And again, it was all about the heat of the moment there, where, you know, obviously XSET just kind of, maybe their mental just wasn't there. It was such an intense match. It was such a long match. It was a grueling match even up to that point, before you have to come back an hour later and play again, that you're already kind of having a tough time keeping all those things in your head mentally. That's tough for anybody. But I agree. I didn't think they should have replayed the round. That's why I went to bed. I thought it was done. I thought it was over.
Yeah, 100%. Not game breaking, but moment breaking. It really seemed. And obviously, we're talking about it, and we've just been flapping our lips. Who the hell are we, right? We've actually got Angel, who had some words to say about this specific moment as well.
I think there is a lot of bugs in any game which is played, especially competitively, and a lot of like small details like Iron Knife not fixed, turret bugging, anything else. There is a lot of stuff happening a lot in a lot of matches. And it's not the best idea to replay rounds, especially after the match is over, because then all the teams will question like all the bugs which is gonna happen in the history of Valorant. Should it be replayed now or not? And I think it's just very bad situation to have. That's why we was very angry about it. I don't think it should be replayed just because of the turret bug. It's not our fault. We shouldn't be involved in this. And on Exit Place, I would just disagree to do it. I would just agree that they lost. And that would be a decision. I think it's obvious for everyone who's watching that this bug is not something like big. And from my point of view, it ruined competitive integrity. Like, it was 2 hours AFK. We don't know, did they watch the match? Maybe some highlights. Maybe they know what we were doing, you know? That's my point of view.
Yeah,
You gotta
that's
respect
tough.
it.
Yeah,
like
100%.
He has a more like measured and like non-emotional take than I do, and the man just had to replay for his tournament
Yeah, he
life
just
at
let
the
me
World
flipping out.
Championship. I would have lost my shit. Like, mad respect to him, and like, I know that like seeing his anger more in the moment as opposed to when he'd sort of recomposed himself for the press conference, when he says that if it were to happen again, they would refuse to play, I think that that is honestly the appropriate reaction as a team. If Riot had done this to me as a coach, I would have been like, this isn't happening. You need to escalate this to literally the highest people that we have here, because this decision is bullshit.
Yeah, that is, you know, we're obviously hindsight Harrys here, because
Yeah, of course.
Heat of the moment. I mean, we saw earlier the XSET Optic interview, right? XSET heat of the moment, say some things that they shouldn't. You know, you have to assume that Psycho is not in the mind of, you know, Valorant as a whole at that moment of losing, versus being in the mind of, holy shit, we get a second chance. Unfortunately, it didn't go the way, right? FPX still ended up winning. It was a banger overtime for Zipan mostly.
Ball don't lie. Ball don't
But
lie.
yeah, exactly. That's my favorite saying in the world. The ball doesn't lie, right? If it's meant to go in, it will go in. And that's exactly what happened.
Casual 1v3s,
I don't know.
It's fine.
This is yeah, casual 1v3s. Zipan and FPX. We'll obviously talk more about that once we get into the show a little bit later, where we're jumping into our champion segment. But yeah, I mean, it's a shitty situation, right? And we'd just be beating a dead horse to keep on going. But I do want to kind of toss it out there. Is there anything that you guys may have left that you want to chomp at for the most part about this whole situation?
I tweeted about it last night, and again, this is like the me being like aggressive in demanding accountability from Riot. They need to release a statement that isn't fucking 3 sentences saying that they're replaying around because there was a bug. They need to go in and say very explicitly what parameters were used to determine that this was a bug, why it is different from the umpteen other bugs that are now going to that have existed in this tournament and are going to continue to exist in this tournament and presumably aren't going to be treated the same way, and why that decision was made the way it was. Because this is literally like, I'm just going to put it the way it is. This decision is going to produce inconsistency for the rest of this event, period. There's no way that this is enforced the same way for the rest of this event, because there are other bugs that check all of the same boxes that I guarantee you aren't going to be caught. And so why was this ruled the way it was? If it was a mistake, just fucking own that it was a mistake. I will respect Riot if they're like, in the heat of the moment, and in retrospect, this was inaccurate. It's impossible to enforce bugs of this particular variety in a reasonable way, so we're just going to not do it for the remainder of the event. That was a mistake. We apologize to FBX and XSET for putting them through what we put them through. We're going to address them more proactively in the future. I would love that take. Alternatively, if they are going to stick to their guns and say we're going to enforce everything like this going forward, actually outline what this is so that we know what bugs are going to fall under this umbrella.
Right? Yeah. It's
There's too much
ambiguity
right
now. And yeah, Anderzz laying it out of what we kind of want to see and to understand what it's going to look like, especially for the rest of champions, because teams still have to play. We've still got the rest of our playoffs to go through to crown a champion, so we still have another weekend of it. It's interesting. Obviously, everybody has their own take. I think most importantly, though, we have to remember that the players didn't ask for this, and I know that you guys in chat are fucking awesome, but anybody else out there who might just be stopping in, Exit didn't ask for this. Obviously, FPX didn't ask for this. So, do not go for their heads, right? This is not something, obviously they could have said no, sure, but heat of the moment for your chance to try again in the biggest tournament, the most meaningful for, the 17-year-old kids on the team. Obviously, you're going to try and run that back. So please take the heat off of Exit. And the heat now is on Riot to kind of figure out what's going on with that. As we do creep closer to our commercial break, a lot of news. We covered a lot of news. There's a lot of spice. A lot more to come, including some champions talk and an interview coming up here shortly. But before we go, once more, I want to thank our friends over at Twitch for helping us, again, pay the bills and put us on. Obviously, we're here on Twitch, and a lot of people do this for free, and we get to do this with a little extra cheddar from Twitch. So thank you, Twitch, for putting us on. We appreciate you. Hey, Twitch, you're all right. We appreciate you. But with that, we are going to hop away for a short second. When we come back, we've got our interview all lined up for you guys, and I'm going to leave it a surprise. Maybe some of you know, maybe some of you don't. We'll be right back.
If you're enjoying Valoranting, feel free to follow us on our other socials. We're over at Twitter at Valoranting, and of course, every Tuesday, 11 a.m. PT, we're live on twitch.tv/DNP.
Welcome back, everybody, to Valoranting, the show where we rant about Valorant. But before we get into anything, JessGOAT, thank you so much for the raid. Hello to JessGOAT's community. We have a Jess on later on in the show to discuss champions because she was freaking there. She was freaking there. But before we get there, somebody who's got a pretty big brain, and you know what? He's got a little bit of aim. It's our interview that we've got lined up for you guys. It's Weltis of Sentinels, the analyst, joining the squad from seemingly, and I could be wrong, seemingly from Twitter analyst to pro esports analyst with Sentinels. Weltis, first and foremost, thank you so much for joining us. Who is Weltis? Who is Weltis?
Well, thanks, Tanner, for the intro. Weltis is that's a great question. If you're being literal, the username, I stole the username from my brother. It's a Minecraft account when I was like 13, and I don't know the meaning of it, so I can't really answer who is Weltis technically. But I guess for myself, like you said, I kind of started posting random stuff on Twitter about six months ago, mostly about Sentinels because I was just like the masses and was a big fan of them. And some honestly more harsh than others, but it kind of just kind of escalated, and I just kept posting stuff that I found that was interesting and using the data in Valorant, and I kind of got the gig, as most of you may know, and so here I am today. Yeah,
here you are today with that. So before this, right, you start this kind of road on Twitter, tossing out the analyst stuff. It really gets picked up by everybody. I mean, even before you were signed, right, you've got like the sideshows and the podcast kind of around the world seeing your stats and what you're putting out there. What were you doing before this, right? What kind of piqued your interest into wanting to dive into, esports analysis?
Yeah, it's a great question. So truthfully, Valorant was my first esport ever. So no CSGO, no Overwatch, no background on anything. So I basically started in quarantine because everyone was really bored and had nothing to do, and Valorant just kind of launched at, honestly, I think, a perfect time. Riot was really smart to launch the pandemic at that time. But no, just joking. But basically, I started playing Valorant, but I was also starting work as a consultant. So I come from a business/finance background, so not super related to data or video games really at all. But there's some math in business, though it's not too difficult. But I've always been passionate about analytics and strategy. I've played like poker a ton before. That was kind of my big thing before this. I played like I think throughout college, 4 years of poker, like thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of more just very, very degenerate, honestly, just gambling. But poker comes with a lot of math and a lot of strategy. So I kind of carried that into Valorant, where I saw like, hey, this is a new sport, so it's understandable, but there's not many people out there using data at all, either publicly or probably within teams or on the broadcast or in the analysis, Reddit, media, whatever it is. And so I just thought that, for myself, I want to learn, like, for myself when I'm watching a game, who's good at what, who's bad at what, why are they good, or stuff like that. And I just thought I'd share what I found, and from there it just kind of took off.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously I've been lurking your chat. By the way, shameless plug for him, just in case he doesn't do it. He's been doing analysis co-streams. Obviously, being a fellow coach and analyst myself, I know I get questions all the time about like, how do we do the things we do? Well, he's literally streaming it. So check it out. Weltis Games on Twitch. Boom, gotcha, bro.
Boom,
Anyways,
boom.
You say that you sort of you came to this from poker, and a lot of people weren't applying numbers yet. Obviously, I come in from the exact same boat. Where did you sort of get your quantitative skill set? Was it something that you sort of grew yourself while you were working with the poker things? Did you work in stats prior? Like, where is it, and sort of how have you had to sort of build it and tweak it to make it compatible with Valorant Esports?
Yeah, it's a good question. Honestly, I've always been a pretty quantitative guy. Like, math has just been my favorite subject in school, and so I think for honestly the basic kind of stats I started with in analytics, you really don't need much of a background. So I get a ton of questions like, oh, how can I get started? And as long as you know really multiplication and division, you can do most of the things I do. And, it's kind of like the harder thing to do. The skill set that's a bit harder, honestly, is not the math. It's kind of learning to figure out what's important, what's not, and how to communicate that information and distill this, because there's a ton of data available, but people need to be able to comprehend and understand it in a quick way. That I think I've kind of learned through my business background, because when we're talking to clients, you're trying to make some stuff that may be difficult to understand pretty easy and concise and quick. And you're trying to draw out the most important things when you're talking to the CEO, right, of a business. They don't have time to hear your 1 hour presentation about what you think is wrong or right about the industry or whatever. So I honestly think a lot of my business background helped me, at least with the kind of soft skills part of data, which is a really underestimated skill if you want to be that type of analyst.
So I want to kind of ask you a little bit more to build onto that, to how you got to the Sentinels. So obviously you're posting on Twitter, you're really getting into the meat of things. You see an opening in terms of the lack of potential that people aren't exploiting and things like that. So how did you get in contact with the Sentinels, and how are you able to kind of convince them that you were the guy, or do they contact you and then you were able to, give them this pitch? And what kind of, and even beyond that, I want to know, like, what kind of things are you saying to them that maybe you could give us some examples of these soft skills that you're talking about?
Great question. So yeah, I just applied. So the way the process worked, if you guys don't know, was Raucus. I think it was either Raucus or the Sentinels main Twitter tweeted out, "Hey, we're doing analyst positions for LCQ." And initially, I was like, "Oh, I love Sentinels and I love Valorant data, but I wouldn't be an analyst because my role was not really analysty. I'd never helped a team. I was kind of just on the reporting side or doing things that, truth be told, aren't necessarily the helpful for a team, right? If you're trying to, for example, one things I've been doing in champs is just trying to rank teams and try to put a metric to how good teams are. Like, Sentinels don't really care about that, right? That's not important to them. I wouldn't help them win. So the skill set was a bit not. I didn't see the direct, I guess, one-to-one. But I kind of, a lot of my friends said, just apply. You're probably smart enough to learn it, and it's a cool opportunity. So I was like, yeah, you know what, I'll just apply. So I wrote, basically the process was pretty simple, but I think they just had you write an email to Raucus. Probably use some like kind of businessy skills to kind of make that email like a little bit, I guess just like impactful and not that many words, kind of in that sense. So that might have helped. But I also tweeted. I mean, having clout definitely helped because I literally added Rob Moore saying, "Hey, I submitted an application, by the way. Just FYI," and he's like forwarded to Raucus or something. So honestly, like the Twitter clout already kind of helped. You know, that's typical Sen, right? Loving the clout. But basically after that, I had a call with Raucus. Pretty long call. But he kind of just talked about, you know, we talked about everything, but the few questions he asked about, you know, what I could bring to the table. Knowing that he explained basically like Sen wasn't really using data, and most teams aren't, I think. So it's not like they were behind. It's just like the truth is, not many teams are. I think. I think it's getting better now, but still a ton of opportunities. So I basically just kind of, you know, without getting into the technicals, basically said, look, you know, I understand, like, heard what he was coming from about his basically thoughts on data. You know, no, there's an opportunity, but also understand that we don't want data to be the sole driver, because I agree that data in Valorant's limited. The sample size is not too great. You have to be careful about how you use it. So kind of just resonated with that and explained for him. Basically came with a few ideas immediately. Okay, this is the few things I would do that I think would drive the highest impact for you guys, and kind of came with like kind of my pitch to him how I could actually help them in the near term. And so that, I think that resonated a lot with him. And yeah, I mean, turnaround was quick though, because I think LCQ was like within a month. So they kind of, that might have expedited things a bit. So I kind of got, you know, I got the confirmation from Raucus and the management team like a week later. And even then, it was a kind of a tight turnaround. So I think there was like 2.5 weeks to LCQ. So we kind of just got rolling from there.
So, and now this is, I don't know if this is kind of taking a step back here, but all that going into it, you apply and they're like, hey, you're there. What then, right? Day of them saying, hey, we want you to be a part of our squad. What was that like for you, right? Because you come from a pretty commercial background, not esports background, to now 6 months later, you're an analyst an assisting analyst in the largest, I would say, the organization, excuse me, that is kind of monopolizing Valorant, grabbing up everybody that, you know, we've seen join the scene. What was that like your first day? You know, were you able to drink that in, or was it difficult to really kind of let that sit because you did have to get to work right away?
Well, yeah, I think I might have, I forget if the teams had like, it was a weird like time period where they were just going to boot camp. So I think there was like literally a day or two where they were like moving in. So it wasn't like, okay, we have scrims, let's go. So I think I had, fortunately, good timing. Like, I didn't have to like immediately drop everything I was doing, kind of thing, because I was still working my other job, and that's a whole other story. But I managed. The lucky thing about my consulting firm is they actually gave me an opportunity to take a break for a while to kind of try this out, which is really dope. But yeah, I mean, I honestly, I didn't kind of expect to get it, because Raucus had said they were talking to a few people. So I was like, okay, you know what, like, you know, there's maybe five people that potential like candidates or something. So, you know, 20% shot or whatever. So I was pretty surprised when I got it, given like my lack of just like overall experience, and never basically actually being a true analyst for a team. But yeah, like I kind of was like, holy shit, I'm on Sentinels, and this is pretty freaking awesome. And yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, man. It was pretty dope. Just thinking about like the Twitter followers, that was honestly the thing. No, I'm just joking. I've been brainwashed. I've been brainwashed by the clout. But yeah, I mean, it was really cool, and it was honestly like I never thought this would happen. I never thought I would be honestly an analyst of any team. I just did this as a really, you know, just my own hobby and passion, just posting my own thoughts. And now, yeah, I'm with like the biggest org in Valorant. So really a crazy like it's not replicable. I'm kind of like get scared that people in the scene think they can just join a tier 1 team, and I was super fortunate, honestly. I think like the stars aligned, but I don't think I think it's going to be pretty hard.
It's all pretty crazy. I mean, like, having gone through sort of the same process myself of like, this is a hobby. Oh, by the way, now you're doing it as your main gig. Like, it's something you can't replicate. And I'm sure for an org of Sentinel stature, it was life changing to say the least.
Yeah.
Sort of looking at you moving into Sentinels, and you touched on it a little bit, where you had to go from what was effectively like impression farm analytics to actionable ones.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, like the Twitter audience capturing ones to stuff that a team can actually use. How easy or difficult did you find that transition? And I guess if you could point to like one main shift in mindset that you had to go through to make that work, what was that process like for you?
It's a good question too. All these are good questions. I keep saying that, but I'm waiting for a bad question. Yeah, so you're right, Anderzz. It goes from impression farming analytics to actually things that can help Sent. I mean, that's kind of the mind shift itself, I think, just trying to find things that can provide the most value. And I think coming from the business background, one of the things my firm kind of preaches to us is something we call 80-20. So it's basically doing 80%, getting 80% of the answer while doing 20% of the work. And so that it comes from, most of the time you can get a pretty good answer with not that much relative effort, and then the remaining part, 20%, to make it technically, 100% perfect, requires a lot of effort, right? So
diminishing returns,
yeah, a lot of diminishing returns when you're doing types of analysis or whatnot. So that I've always believed in that, and so for Raucous and Sentinels, my initial pitch and my initial way of thinking was also like, okay, what are like, there's a million things I could do for them, right? I could look at econ, I could look at ults, I could look at comp win rates, I could look at whatever it is. But what are the few things that in the short amount of time I have that I think can generate the most value for them? And so that's kind of the approach I came into working with Sen. And so I would track all the stats I think were potentially impactful and that are important to a team to understand how good they are, and then point out like, okay, you guys, it was kind of hard because stage 2 obviously they had a few subs and Sick was out, and so it's hard to really what data is good. So we ended up using scrim data, which over time actually gets to a good sample size. Yes, we do scrim, but I know it's breaking news. So yeah, I mean, just from that, I really just try to nail down like, okay, there are a few gaps, right? Most teams probably have a lot of gaps in across the board. Some things on attack, some things on defense, whatever. Maybe it's gun rounds, eco rounds, maybe it's the op, whatever it is. So, but in the 2 weeks we had, and everyone talks about this, like it's really not a lot of time, and there are some probably things that showed in the gameplay that there wasn't that much time to practice. But what are the few things in 2 weeks, the most important things that could win us the most rounds? And that's kind of the mindset I had, right? I kind of tried to translate stats to a number of rounds that we could have won if we improved this like one thing. It's not as simple as that because it's just never that simple with data, but that's kind of the mindset I came.
I think that's a great distillation of it. Like, is that going to be all encompassing? Absolutely not. But as far as a one-liner goes, I don't think you're ever going to get much closer.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking for actionable, right? Things that you can actually have impact on. So let me ask this a little bit, and I'm gonna dig into the clout farming a little bit here. So you've got obviously Shroud and Zelsis coming into the team, right, for this event. So I mean, obviously, expectations for the fans are through the roof and these kind of things. But you as the analyst with these two players coming in, regardless of their clout status or whatever, what kind of role do you have in terms of approaching those players and talking to them and having some kind of impact on their play or their decision making? I know it's a short period of time, but what was the process like getting those two players acclimated?
Yeah, so another good question. So just the way the communication worked, because I had to be remote, because it was kind of last second, and those guys were at the boot camp. Communication with the players was not as frequent as if I was, working directly with, or honestly just in person. But those guys were definitely, yeah. I mean, the thing is, those guys, like, we were definitely trying to get them up to speed. But I mean, more so Shroud than Zelsis, because Zelsis had obviously played in a structured team pro environment. And so the data definitely, like, it kind of was like, the data would say things about Zelsis and Shrouds, either styles on certain maps, or what they were good or were bad at. And so, we would like, I guess, like, we would use that data in a way to, like, okay, guide them and help them figure out, and just kind of reaffirm, like, especially with Shroud, like, hey, look how good you are at this, because I think we really wanted to instill confidence in his play.
What did it say about him planning the spike?
Oh yeah, I think we missed.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I had to.
We missed that one in the data. Yeah, that was tough. But basically, didn't try to really, like, with the exception of a few things, I think across the few weeks, like, kind of didn't, especially with Shroud, didn't try to change too much of the way they played. Just wanted to get Shroud comfortable. And then a lot of the stats were kind of more team focused, or directed toward, like, more veterans, where we could kind of be more, I guess, like, honest, and kind of more like, okay, we expect kind of this out of you. Let's work on that. That makes sense. And then for Zelsis and Shroud, kind of just letting them get reps in, and pointing out maybe one or two things that were really kind of important, we thought.
And I'm gonna come at you two-pronged here. What is your relationship with kind of the players with the information that you're bringing, and if there is a relationship with the players in your guys' dialogue, what are you giving the players versus what you're taking to the other analysts or Raucus, for example? Is there a difference in between what information is going where?
Yeah, so there wasn't too much of a relationship. So basically, the information, like the technical information, would be mostly directly towards Raucus and Danny. And I think the logic there was, the players had a lot to. It was just kind of information overload, and they kind of wanted to not filter, but kind of make sure that they present it to them at the right way, in the right time. And so, kind of, most of my work was in calls, or just sending stuff to Raucus and Danny, and then figuring out kind of like, okay, because I think it's definitely not as effective to just present, like, screenshots or spreadsheets to players. I think Raucus and Danny being in person would be more like, we all thought it was probably just more optimal for it to come from, like, the head coach. It would probably be much different if I was in person, but that's just, like, the nature of remote work, I think.
Yeah, death by PowerPoint doesn't work for anybody at any given time, anywhere.
Yeah.
So is it possible, without giving up too much or getting too deep into, what you do for Sentinel specifically, or like Sentinel stats specifically, we spoke with Raucus, and he couldn't really give us, at the time, he basically just said, you're not necessarily, like, hard in the anti-stratting or what our anti-strats look like. Instead, you're giving us information and kind of percentage plays, stuff like that is important in Valorant, right? We're always looking for the percentage play. Can you give us an example of, going into a matchup against the guard, for example, and what you would be doing, kind of looking into that team and what information you would be looking to bring? Maybe not what you actually did,
Sure.
but just kind of holistically.
No, yeah, I mean, I can give you roughly, because I don't know on the top of my head exactly I don't know, like, exact numbers or anything, but basically, for the guard specifically,
it could be any team, just like kind of how you're dissecting the teams.
Yeah. So, for example, 100 Thieves was a good one, where I did do a little bit of, like, anti-strat with the data, because that was, like, we actually had, like, I think 5 days or something, where the guard, we didn't, because we just had no, like, footage, and we didn't think it was that useful to look at stage 2 data. It's so far, anything can change. So basically for like 100 Thieves anti-stratting, I kind of I mean I watched the VODs, but basically I think I would just try to quantify tendencies of them as much as possible. So, you know, X% of the time when they shoot a dart on this wall, they go B or A. When they have KO ult, they X% of the time they hit A. And so it's pretty basic stuff, but it's honestly because it's very manual. Just because the data the data you can actually pull publicly from Riot is not that comprehensive. It takes a lot of time to actually get those basic stats, like how often they go B, how often they go A, is honestly and divided by eco rounds, gun rounds, all that type of jazz. What maps, blah blah blah. It actually takes quite a bit of work. Though even though the analysis itself is not too hard. So basically, I was doing that for like basically all the maps 100 Thieves played, at least the maps that we thought we would likely play against them. And yeah, man, I think I can't remember exactly how correct some of the things were. Like I remembered when I wrote the thing, like on Breeze, like they would do like certain darts, they would always hit the same site. And so I'm pretty sure though, when I was watching it, and as a fan, because I'm a fan and an analyst now, like when I'm watching it, I'm not like, I wasn't actually like, thinking, oh fuck, like that, or that dart, like that was bad information. They changed it up or something. Like I was like, did I miss that? Like what's going on? But like I'm pretty sure, like, I mean, props to the 100 Thieves. They changed up their stuff quite a bit from the next, because we got rolled on them on Breeze. And so I think I think some of the stuff they definitely changed up their utility setups and their early round stuff. So props on them for that. But that's kind of what I would be basically doing. I think that's one of the main things you can do with data for anti-stratting.
Very cool. I want to jump in here real quick because you mentioned that like a lot of this was super manual, and you mentioned earlier that just because of the timeline and because of the way the roster shifted, it was all like data from scrims. How are you collecting data from scrims? Like obviously we don't have Overwatch style machine learning where it's like literally just reading the screen for you. So like what was I assume that it was largely manual transcription. How were you working through scrims data? Like where were you even getting these numbers to work with?
Yeah, it was 100% manual. So I would just watch the scrims, and I mean, I had a massive spreadsheet of, I don't know, it must be like like 1,000 rows of 20 columns. So you can kind of I mean, some of them are just like the same, right? It's just like the date or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I was just manually writing down like who killed what, who killed who, what site, what was the retake setup, what was the postman setup, what ults, stuff like that. As I was like watching the stream, so it was not like I was working like kind of doubling the amount of work, I guess. So it's kind of just like, but you also, like, when you're doing that, you can't actually, it's harder to actually think about like the game and what's going on and like
watching
strategy.
In
Yeah,
heavy
you're just like
quotes.
you're literally just like trying to record everything. And so who knows, maybe I don't know how it works in the other esports, but one day maybe we'll get like being able to not do it manually, because I think, and maybe 2023 franchising is just enough data that you don't need to use scrims. I think that would be great, though I don't know if everyone knows the exact format of the frequency of games. But yeah, I think scrim data was kind of what we had to use, so yeah, it just had to be done.
So I want to real quick, if we have enough time here, to kind of build on what you're saying. Like some of the, I'm starting to see some ideas for what you want to see potentially in the future. Maybe this is a broad question, but what do you envision as the future of analysts in Valorant? Like, how do you foresee them kind of taking Valorant to the next level?
Yeah. So I think long term, I think, so truth be, I mean, this is a really, really, really good question. I think long term data is going to play a huge role in Valorant, or it should. I just think there's a ton of opportunity. There's a ton of data available, and I think the teams that invest in good data analysts earlier on will be better than the teams that kind of don't believe in the data. And it takes time for any sport, esport, whatever it is, to kind of trust data, because you have people who've played the game for 5, 10, 15, 20 years that never used data, right? It just wasn't available. It wasn't a thing. Even like for something like baseball. Baseball is like the analogy I use, like, right? Moneyball, which was, the revolution of data that changed the way the game is played. So, I mean, it's gradual. Like, data will be first used to kind of plug holes, plug leaks, just track basic tracking. And then that's like kind of level 1. And then level 2 is kind of like the whole revolution of like, maybe we don't even play the game correctly. Like, maybe you're supposed to half buy every round, like, or like force every single round, like, who knows, right? No one actually knows. And so I get it. Maybe that's how CSGO was or whatever, but, and maybe I'm missing some papers or real good analyses of that being the correct way to play. But I think there's just a ton of, in 2 or 3 years or 4 years, I think it's very possible that the game is played in a very different way. Maybe defense, you're like, they're supposed to like 5 stack a site every time.
Just gamble stack every game.
Never spread out. Like that could very be possible, but just no one knows. And so it's exciting for the future. I do think, back kind of to the original point, I think in the near future, I think teams will start to hopefully invest in like one strategical kind of macro analyst. So for Sentinels, that would be like Danny, and then one more on the data side, while everyone's working together. But you just can't do everything. You just can't do everything as one person.
I've tried. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
There it is, from experience and from Weltis' mouth. It doesn't work to try and do it all. Well, that's all the time we've got for this interview specifically. If you guys want to find out more and you want to continue to pick the brain, at Weltis Games on Twitter and on Twitch is where you can find Matthew here. But he's not leaving just yet. We are going to hop away for a short break. We got some Champions talk to continue after this, but our party grows by one. We're going to be bringing in JessGOAT right after this.
If you've enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, and make sure you hit the bell for the future noties, but also comment below with what you'd like to see in our future shows.
And we're back, Champions Talk, and our party has grown by one. We welcome JessGOAT. Well, Jess, first and foremost, thank you for the host. You're too kind. Thank you for the raid, bringing your community on over. And now we get to talk about, I feel like, what everybody is on the minds. It's Champions, right? And it's not just the Killjoy turret that we talked about earlier. It's what actually happened. Everything basically before the last 4 hours of last night's broadcast, because since the last show, playoffs started and things got weird and teams moved on and some teams didn't. But we're just going to kind of take it from the top here. We opened up quarterfinals. DRX, Paperthin, they 2-0 FPX. I don't know if anybody in the world was expecting that, but it happened.
Yeah, let me just hold on. I got all the EMEA tears in here. Oh, tasty. So good. No, I mean, like, look, this was probably the match where I realized that DRX was different. This is where I realized that the same problems that they were having in previous events weren't there. They were mid-rounding better, and again, that goes to the IGLing of stacks and the all-around clutch ability that he and Mako and even Zest in this one have to work together to kind of grind through these insane overtimes they've been having on Ascent to find great value. And then on Breeze, I mean, that was an expected win. I think there are teams that can obviously beat them on Breeze, as we're going to see later, but they are a solid Breeze team, and they just had a fundamental better understanding of the map. But I mean, on Ascent, it's about their mid-round adaptations. It's about changing things round around. They're always looking a little bit different on this map. They have a read on how to kind of adjust to what teams are doing for the most part. Obviously, I don't think they have the same firepower that FPX does, for example, but they're able to kind of overcome it.
Yeah, and we're seeing some of that firepower right here, right? This was in that Fnatic matchup where Mako just goes crazy in a 1-2. It's maturity is something that you brought up earlier in the show for this team, and it really did start to show, and obviously making a top 4 is great. Did anybody feel, because I know Paperthin is a DRX fan, did anybody feel that FPX kind of just came out and shit the bed a little bit? Does anybody feel that, not to take away from the DRX performance, but obviously we expect a whole lot, right? We expect a lot out of FPX, and they've looked so shaky. Actually, I want to go to Jess with this one, because Jess, you kind of got to see it firsthand. In this first playoff matchup, because I believe you took your leave before this started, did this surprise you at all?
I mean, I'm always under the belief, probably because I come from a coaching background, that your team will always have one bad day at the office at a tournament. Always. And I always see a team where they have that day, and I'm just like, I mean, Optic has it early in the tournament usually. Some teams have it at, the kickoff of playoffs. I mean, over prepared. Some teams go in and things are changed and it shakes them a little bit. For me, I didn't really think much of it because I was like, well, they're still in the tournament. It doesn't mean shit to me. It just means that they don't have that extra chance anymore. So for me, I was like, no, I wouldn't really like if I was on the desk. Obviously, I'd have to use that as my my data to be able to go back and be like, look at them, they lost the game. Wow, they shouldn't have. But yeah, personally, I don't think it really mattered that much. To be fair, I think FPX as a team had a bad day at the office, and everyone does.
Okay, Jess, coming right back to you then, because this is an interesting matchup. It's the one that we got to kick off playoffs, and I believe it's the one that we're probably going to get, if not first, second, coming up here shortly in the next few days. In FPX, they have to play each other again. Now, how do you feel about it?
Isn't there, I mean, look, we got Weltis here, so let's pull up some data. Yeah. Isn't there some ridiculous, like, 60, 70% win rate on rematches at international VCT level anyway? So if I just pretend like I don't have a bias against DRX so that Paperthin doesn't beat me across the camera right now, I'm going to say subjectively, the stats are pushing us towards a rematch where FPX gets their revenge. My personal opinion is probably pretty obvious that FPX should win that, just because I had to dump all my DRX stocks, like, 4 months ago now, whatever it was. So I gave up the stocks pretty quickly. They dropped, and I couldn't reinvest in them. I don't think they need a roster change. I think their consistency, not on a macro level, but on a micro level, some of their players really struggle with consistency, and it's why some maps look shocking, others look really good. I can't put my money on that because they're just not consistent, so I don't think they'll come in and be able to do it again. I'd love for them to shock me, but I think FPX is a way more dominant team. Like, fundamentally.
I agree. I really agree. There's a lot of micro mistakes that I see with DRX in some of their adjustments when they try to swing. They don't make a lot of over peaks, but like when they do peak, sometimes they're shaky. Sometimes they overcorrect with their steps, things like that, where they're just not quite as crisp as some of the other teams. And so what makes DRX function, what makes them flow, is when they're working together, when they're having solid fundamentals. They can set up amazing crossfires. That's what makes them difficult on Breeze and other maps for some teams is one plant down. They do a really good job of making sure they're locking down the space. Everybody's doing their job, covering their angles. The problem is when they get to scrappy situations, when they are required to win duels on their own, a lot of times they're not pound for pound as good as these other teams.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's got to be the most believable, right? Because that's coming from the fan, right? The DRX fan. If anybody's in their corner, it's Paperthin. Yeah, I mean, I feel that I called the end of the road probably a little too early. I thought that they would lose the first EX, and then the lower elimination bracket would look a little different. But it does kind of feel that this Cinderella story might be coming to an end, especially with what we've seen, with how fired up FPX are. Obviously, this XSET match meant a lot, and I apologize if I'm going to go to the new members joining us on the show, because we've had a lot to talk about it. But I'm just going to kind of go down and for the groups, was there anything that really stood out here? Either Weltis or Jess, the loud 2-0 over Leviathan, Optic Gaming 2-1 over Team Liquid, XSET over Fnatic. XSET over Fnatic, I could feel like that's probably an upset given the way they look. But in those three matchups, is there anything else that kind of stood out to you guys, more specifically before we get into the upper semis?
Take the stage, Weltis.
Sorry, you said groups. Were we talking like the upper quarters?
Yeah, just quarters, upper quarters. Yeah, sorry if I said groups. I apologize. Upper quarters.
All good. I was like XSET Fnatic. Nothing too surprising. I think Leviathan. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. I think I still think they're really smart and disciplined. They save a ton. That's one of the things I noticed. Like they're like one of the best teams that just like, 3v5, no, we're out of there. Or 2v4, we're out of there. 3v4, we're out of there. Which I think is actually really, really smart for the team. But yeah, their firepower was clearly just not there against Loud and FPX. So not too surprising there. I think most of the other matches, though, I mean, let's be real, like all these 8 teams pretty much had a pretty good shot of winning. Maybe we think like there's Liquid might have been the odd one out, but honestly, I think all 7 the rest of the teams, like if they were on peak form, could win this tournament. And so I think it kind of goes down to map pool all the time. And the EMEA teams, we've talked about it a lot. I think, or people have talked about it a lot. The weakness of Pro kind of has screwed a lot of them. And so, but no, I'm not too surprised by the results. I think all those teams really could win any match, any day.
Any match, any day. So this is what it was. The matchup that I want to jump to is actually now in the lowers, and I want to get both your thoughts, Jess, and Anderzz, your thoughts from the coaching perspective. It's Optic beat Team Liquid, XSET beat Fnatic, NA out on top. We love that. That drops down into that lower bracket for Team Liquid to play Fnatic, a series, or I guess a matchup that is played over and over and over, obviously in EMEA. Now you have to come and do it. Jess, I'll come to you first, right? Sure. What is it like for these two teams to, what's the prep like when you basically have each other figured out outside of maybe Pearl?
I would say the prep for Fnatic would have been abysmal. Like for a team that's highly strategic and for a team that I probably rank as probably the highest thinkers in the game, going up against Team Liquid was probably, quote unquote, one of the worst matchups they could have gotten. Because I don't know how, over a year in EMEA, we stand on the desk and we say they're trying to reinvent the wheel again and they're trying to do this and they're trying to do that. And that's always Team Liquid. I mean, when we saw the Phoenix, of course, we were trying to work out what the thought process was for Scream to play that. And we still are. We don't really have an answer from him yet as to what the goal of that is. But I think that was possibly, for Fnatic, one of the worst matchups they could have gotten. Like, if I had have drawn anyone else, I know it was a 2-0 and everyone's like, but if you think about them prepping and everything like that from a coaching perspective, if I'm Mini, I'm sitting there and like it's like sand falling through your fingers. You're like, maybe it could be some of this. Is it the needle in the haystack that they're going to play today? Are they going to play like this? Team Liquid is very instinctual. They're like cerebral players that act on instinct and game sense 9 times out of 10. And you can't prep for that. So I was glad with how Fnatic dealt with them, but that must have been very tiresome. Those rounds must have been very tiresome for the players to have to think like this. So I'm glad they stuck to their fundamentals. That's probably, as a coach, what I'd be telling them. Play your crossfires. You see a B here. Play your crossfires. They're going to come in with firepower. That is how Team Liquid likes to roll. It's how they get their momentum in a round. Look at that crossfire left and right. That's your fundamentals, and that's something that Fnatic is able to use and counter a team like Team Liquid. Otherwise, yeah, you give them 1v1s and you'll lose 9 times out of 10. So I'm glad they did that. But I think they met their match the next game, so I think it's interesting stylistic differences there.
Yeah, that's a tough one. But yeah, Anderzz, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, Liquid Fnatic is almost like the EMEA El Clasico at this point. And like, I've been on the receiving end of it, like literally been part of that matchup. It is very much so what Jess is describing, where like, anti-stratting TL is kind of like trying to read from a book that spontaneously combusts every 5 seconds. You put it out, read like 3 words, and then it bursts into flames again. Put it out, read 3 words, bursts into flames again. Like, it's a never-ending wheel. And I think that the best way to handle it is exactly what Jess was describing. Like, you just got to play fundies. Like, if I can see Mini literally saying verbatim to the team, play it like a scrim. And that's the mentality that they have coming in. It's like, focus on fundies, play it like a scrim, like trust your firepower, and we just win on brute force. And I think that this iteration of the roster, like this matchup, if you look at it historically, it's been very back and forth. So the fact that Fnatic sort of took it with this level of comfort is actually in many ways a coming of age. And I think Alphair being part of the roster is a huge part of that. Like, they now have the firepower where they get like a scrim, and they are just gonna like hard diff TL finally. I think that like TL maybe even is backsliding a little bit in terms of there's a little bit less substance backing their innovation than I think there has been in the past. That's a personal read, but I want to credit more so like the evolution of Fnatic to really being this truly like dynamic, can handle entropy type of roster, whereas in the past it's been something that the team has struggled with a little bit more.
So to go right back to then, Anderzz, what happened in the DRX matchup, right? Obviously a closer, a little tighter of a series, but is, this team that you're talking about have, how they've grown and kind of matured as a squad, and they can play both styles. They can play strict Fnatic. They can play scrim Fnatic, as strict and as scrim Fnatic. What happened against DRX, man?
So I think Fnatic indicates the way that series should have gone. I think that Fnatic like really just put that away and did really well. I think Ascent should have been a closeout on Fnatic's part. And I mean, it was a 14-12 overtime. One round changes. One guy hits a shot, that's a 2-0.
And so sticks the defuse.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't gonna go there, but yep, not wrong.
Yeah,
they literally thanked him on the Korean broadcast. They're like, "Thank you, Enzo. Thank you."
Yeah,
Jesus.
rough.
That's rough.
And then I think that, so under the premise that I think if things go perfectly, it was a 2-0. I think that what happened afterwards is actually the crux of not only why Fnatic went out of this, why I think EMEA has been struggling so much. Their map pool is bad. I think that Fnatic in particular came into this event banking on a map ban strategy that hit on their Pearl requiring an auto ban. And when their Pearl didn't show up, their map ban got horrible. I think it was literally in your stream, Weltis, where like the day before the XSET match, I literally laid out the priority of where I thought Fnatic's map pool fell, and I put Fracture towards the bottom of their pool, which a lot of people, like knowing Fnatic has a great history on Fracture, they probably wouldn't have expected that. I think that if you want to take a really objective, hard look at it, Fnatic's Fracture wasn't that good at this event. It genuinely wasn't. And so if I looked at this map draft, I literally would have called it before the match even started. If it goes to Fracture, Fnatic lose. I would have been very confident in saying that. And so I think it should have been a 2-0. I think that it was very, very like marginal differences on Ascent. But as soon as it went to that map 3, it was almost like hands up, fuck, this is probably it.
And this right here, I was screaming at my computer at this play specifically because you've got that tension of the res coming through. It gets stopped a couple of times. And then obviously Stax has been a player for DRX that we've mentioned kind of, you know, just at the top in way of gameplay and way of the brain, is really doing a lot for his team. Obviously, we've got other matchups to talk about, some spicier than others. Real quick, tossing it out there. Anybody, first one at it, DRX Loud. 2-0 for Loud. Anything really stand out to anybody there?
Another day at the office.
Okay. That's what I was
Brazilian
thinking.
super
Loud
team finally being a super team? Sure.
Yeah.
They
finally
always
got
were. They always were. It's not fair that you go up against a fucking Masters winner that early on in a tournament.
Yeah.
They always
If you're
were
gonna-
that good.
But you have to beat them anyway.
Sure, but we would be talking about them so differently if they came second or third.
True.
We would.
Yeah.
So if they
I
didn't go
wanna
up against
say-
winners,
oh, yeah,
they
go
would
ahead.
already be rated higher. And the fact that people haven't fathomed that is crazy to me.
Weltis, go for it. I saw you getting.
Weltis, yeah, go.
No, I mean, I thought DRX tossed Breeze. I mean, it kind of it kind of is the root of their problems. They don't, especially their defense is a little bit capped sometimes, and especially they don't. I feel like they're not willing to make too much. I mean, everyone knows this. They're not really their adjustments mid game if things aren't working. Really is not good. They've shown better. You know, they've shown I feel like a few maps like Ascent a few times. They've switched it up the way I think they played Fnatic. They got a few rounds after changing a little bit of timeout in the mid map there. But yeah, Breeze. You know, I think the 9-3 was pretty tough, and it's hard to read into the mental of this team. And you kind of hope that the professionals, you can't get phased by tossing a 9-3, but you always wonder like how would Haven be a little bit closer if they actually closed out that map. And I think they lost like a crazy 4v2 post plant when it like a crucial round at 1-4 or something like that, and kind of from there I think it was just it was gonna be a loss. But I think we saw some of the lack of firepower in DRX in that game too, and so it's a bit worrying. You know, I'm a big DRX fan too. That I want them to win, but their firepower is a bit concerning. They can't win many really consistently like 50-50s compared to some of the other teams. So it's
I think the scoreboard tells a lot, like reinforces a lot of the narratives that you're plugging there. It's like, okay, so firepower is an issue. You look at Buzz's scoreline, primary fragger, horrible map 1. even worse map too. So you see both that firepower deficiency and the mental spiral potentially after losing the 9-3. So like, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that's like,
yeah, his stats. If I can't hit against Fnatic, he was pretty terrible map 1 and 2. And I was kind of I thought Buzz replacing this duelist would be like a real change that DRX could actually make a deep run. And so it all was looking good in the group stage, but all was also looking good in the group stage with RB as the main duelist in previous events. So I don't know. It's something about the duelists once they get. I think maybe it's just like the top teams kind of can just shut them down. They just don't have the talent as some of the fraggers in the top teams. So we'll see. Kind of. I guess maybe this is a bit of copium, but I think I was talking about this with you, Anderzz. I think, but them. I think there's a world where them beating Fnatic in this cursed game, it was their biggest challenge, and now they're just going to play like they have nothing to lose. It's like upside from here, and they just like kind of I see a world where they win it because they unlock like that they move past the hardest challenge they had, and now they just like play very confidently with like whimsically but confidently. I think that's a real possibility.
Momentum is max. Their special bar is full. Like they are ready to go the fuck off.
They're entering the combo for the super right now. I mean, I know for a fact, talking to them behind the scenes, that's their mentality right now. Like they for them, this tournament was about getting past that hurdle of that 5th, 6th place. Getting to 4th and beyond that is their goal for this event. They've hit that goal. Now they can play with a little bit more confidence. And I think there are two things that stood out to me. Buzz, when he's not confident in his shots, it shows. It's very clear that he just can't keep up with some of the other players when he's not in form. And it's a lot of mental for Buzz. You can tell by his body language. We can literally, I sit with DRX staff and talk with them during a lot of these matches, and we can literally tell by his body language how he's going to play that day. Like we just know when he walks out on the stage. So he's gotten better about it. He's able to recover better. He's accepted criticism very well, and he's tried to improve as best as he can. I think putting him on the duelist role shows a lot of confidence, but then also to Loud's credit, I want to give them a lot of credit in this Breeze. I think they learned a lot from what 100 Thieves was doing against DRX on Breeze, really keeping track of Buzz, shutting him down, and giving themselves good opportunities, particularly on their attacker side. They know that DRX is going to have a very good attacker side that's very hard to deal with no matter what. So focus on their attacker side. You just saw Buzz getting smothered with utility by Loud, and it was something that I noticed that 100 Thieves was doing a really good job, was keeping track of Buzz, especially with the Sovas, to make sure you know where he's at, and then you're going to lock him down. And like you were saying, Weltis, there was a lack of adaptation from the side of DRX. Buzz was just holding down the left side of Pyramid the whole time. I mean, that was basically all he did, and there was no change, and they just kept abusing it.
Yeah, he was just getting shot in halls too, because they didn't play anyone there too, and pretty sad.
I love that this started as is like Loud 2-0 DRX, whatever. Jess is like another day at the office, and then it just broke into our best segment yet, talking about these two teams and really breaking down DRX. So we had a little bit of spice earlier on the show. This next matchup was a little bit of that spice. It's the mild. It's not the hot Buffalo. It's the mild Buffalo. But it was NA versus NA, Optic Gaming versus XSET. I'm going to go, again, start with you, Weltis and Jess, just because we haven't gotten your takes on it. But XSET, they lose the series. Post-match, or the post-match conference comes around, and they are accusing of, running these technical timeouts. What are your guys' thoughts? Jess, I'll go to you first. What are your thoughts on that aspect of it? Just kind of XSET accusing, although, taken back, redacted, accusing Optic of abusing.
I have been in the esports scene long enough, both as a player, analyst, a coach, and obviously analyst and caster now, that I know, especially from coming from Siege, when a team is doing that. It happens still to this day. It happens, and it's not that I would say it's very obvious to the naked eye, but to the trained eye, knowing I've had players try and pull that, my own players try and pull that shit, I've had other teams try and pull that shit. You know when it's happening and you can't prove it. There is no semblance of proof that you can pull from it. You also can't, the admins can't prove it either. The admins will stand there and they'll say, well, we've done our due diligence, we've looked at this. You can't prove that. There's no time under the sun that you could prove that. So whether they were doing it or not is irrelevant in my opinion, because you get a longer period to talk about it, the better team wins. At that point, both of you have had time to flesh it out. The only thing you can argue about is momentum at that point. And then you're going into the micro parts about, you know, psychology or mental coaching and everything like that. And if you don't have a good, you know, leader on the team, and that's where the cracks start to show. And that's when the quote unquote less well-rounded team loses. So I think if you're going to make the accusation, do have proof, because there's many of us who have sat across from a team knowing full well that that's what they're doing. We have no proof, and we're going to sound like the sore losers if you bring it up. So sometimes you just have to bite your tongue and live with that. I liked Def's tweet. I'm glad that we're bringing this up. I liked it because he owned it straight away. Venting, I don't think venting is the right word for it. I'm glad he used that publicly. I don't believe that's what I think he felt afterwards was he should have kept it to himself. And not that he was venting, but that they truly thought that there might have been something going on there. It's their right to think that. I truly believe that it's their right to think that. Whether it's the truth or not is irrelevant, because admin decisions were made regardless, and then you move forward. Everyone knows that it happens in every esports game. It happens in every esports game. You say it doesn't, you don't know enough about esports. So I feel bad for them if it did happen, but at that point, you just don't have enough mental, you know, resilience to push forward, and you're the worst team. So bad luck, buddy.
Bad luck, buddy. You got to keep the momentum going yourself. Do something. You got to get bunny hop around the map while it's happening, because you got to keep the momentum up. Weltis, did you have any initial thoughts just about that situation as a whole before we jump into the matchup as a whole?
No, you know, I have 6 months of esports experience, maybe a year if you count just casually starting to watch. So any drama is fun to me. You know, this is first time I think someone's like publicly really in a big profile match, like, you know, called someone out for that. So I was just enjoying the drama, honestly. You know, he probably should have just kept it to himself. But I don't think it's like, you know, I think going forward, like, it's not going to be a big deal. I don't think it's going to like taint XSET or even Def's like reputation or anything. I think it's just like, yeah, you're frustrated. You know, you kind of want to blame something. Not everyone's like the greatest loser, to be honest. So I don't think it's like that big of a deal.
Yeah, I do wish a little bit, because XSET have kind of been taking the bad boy route. I said this earlier on the show, but we were having issues with Discord and stuff, and people were getting disconnected. But hey, if anything, Cyclo should have just doubled down and just been like, yeah, these guys are fucking cheating, man. And it's like, what can you do? You can't beat cheaters. Then just really became, you know, the villain and the bad guy. Obviously, you can't do that, because this community, it really will come for your head. But it would have been cool to see, just for like the caricature that he's been playing and shushing the crowd and all that stuff. It's been a lot of fun. But yeah, so they apologized. They kind of wiped their hands of that. But before all that happened, we had a couple of maps. Now, Haven and Ascent for Optic and XSET, maps that we've seen, whether it be international or you know, back home in NA. But this was our first, I believe, our first look at NA versus NA Pearl. And now we could talk all day about how we feel about Pearl. But Anderzz, I'll come to you first. What did you think specifically? Because it's pretty widely regarded that NA seems to have the best grasp on Pearl, and then Optic come out and 13-8 XSET, which to me would say, you know, that's like just below the cutoff of a really close game. And, you know, so are Optic the best NA Pearl?
Here's my searing hot take. APAC actually has the best Pearl. I think Paperrex would take literally any team in the world on this map.
Wow.
I would argue that I'm confident that they would be able to do that. I think that 100 Thieves probably has the second best Pearl. So this was literally like a battle of the teams that are like up there, but I think are missing like pretty critical macro strategic things. I actually like XSET's approach to the map more. I think XSET just got diffed by individual players on this for the most part. Like Yay went plus 11 KD. What are you gonna do? Like, I don't think that that's like, oh, XSET has a poor macro strategic read, or that like Optic showing some like crazy like mastery of the map. I think that's Yay going the fuck off, as he tends to do. Given like that's not to be like down on what XSET or on what Optic does to create those opportunities for Yay. Obviously, there are systems in place to create those opportunities for him, but on the overall, I don't think that this was like a a Pearl superiority thing, I think this was a team diff.
Ooh. I have a hot take on it, is that whilst obviously XSET showed a lot of Pearl, and there seemed to be quite a significant win rate on it for them, the teams that they went up against are EMEA, right? So let's assume that EMEA
Where's Pearl?
shit on Pearl. So that doesn't count. So that draws away 75% of the games that they played. So if you're saying Paper X is best, let's just go by that theory, that formula. Paper X is best, 100 Thieves got the better or whatever. I would say if they didn't win Pistol in second, that's 4 rounds taken away. Then they only get 4 rounds in total. Then essentially they got shit on. Yeah? So I think they got shit on. It's only because they won Pistol in second. So I truly think that outside of EMEA, maybe it's stylistic, maybe it's strategy, maybe it's composition, whatever it is, that, yeah, Optic shit on them and are probably way better than them on Pearl.
So my thoughts on Pearl were that you were either going to have the Neon or the Rays. Optic are obviously a lot different. Do you feel that it was, as much as it could have been a player diff, Paperthin, also that comp diff of just bringing in no duelists and having just heaps of utility, right? It's the Astra in here, I believe. No, it's the Viper in here.
The Viper,
instead of your duelist, which I feel like the back and forth is you either have the Astra or you have the Viper. Optic are running both. Do you think that this comp diff is what kind of sets Optic apart?
I think it helps. I mean, I think you need to either have a Viper or a Sage on this map, like, to control space. It's such a wide open map, and there's a lot of twists and turns. So you need to have a little bit of extra control ability, whether that be that second controller in Viper or maybe a Brimstone. I could see a world where that's maybe potentially viable as a double controller play, kind of like Bind a bit. But you need to have something like that in there to really make sure that you're able to do that. And I get the idea with the Neon that you're sort of able to do that, but it's not nearly as effective. It's not nearly as efficient, not nearly as long lasting as a Viper. Plus, you get some post-plant lineups and things like that with the Viper, especially if you want to attack B site. I think the Viper is really, really critical for that. I think it really, really opens up a lot of possibilities for putting up those toxic screens. You know, the Viper's pit, you could wrap it around the corner before you even get the fight, for example. So things like that are really optimal for playing that side of the map without a Viper. So I think this does play into it quite a bit.
And so now we're making our list. We're getting to the thick and juicy part of what's about to happen, which is that you guys are the brains, and I love that. I love it. I'm play-by-play, peanut brain. You guys are the actual brains behind all of this. So being able to dissect all of these matches has been awesome. Now we kind of get put in this hot seat of the only matchup we haven't really talked about, FPX versus XSET, which would probably be way too long, especially with, FPX having the 6th player on Ascent, being that turret. So we'll kind of just wash our hands of that one. Very sad, and we could talk for hours, but we only have a bit more time to talk about our upper finals, which will probably be played first, followed by our lower round 3. So we'll start in the upper finals. Weltis, I'll come to you, right? Because you've been digging deep into North America. I don't know how much you've been digging into Optic specifically, because they didn't have to go through the LCQ and stuff like that, but what speaks to you with this matchup specifically, outside of that we've seen it 100 times?
No, I mean, I'm just interested to see, what Loud can do. I honestly thought they could have had the initial match. I think they had a good lead in on Fracture, and things kind of crumbled there. So I think it's going to be a really, really close one. It's really hard for me to pick a side, though. I feel like it's hard to really doubt Optic, though. I think FNS's mid rounding has been probably like some of the best I've seen ever from him. And so I'm not sure if Loud, I mean, they have some time to kind of look into it, so that might mitigate that advantage. They've got 2 days, break, 2 or 3 days. So, that advantage, that I usually might lean Optic here might be mitigated a bit, but, Chet's probably pulling some, and who knows, they've been switching comps, I think, in the tournament. Maybe we'll see something different. I just think it's really hard to say. I think it's going to be a great game. Hopefully it goes to 3. But yeah, I mean, I'm pulling for my NA brothers, of course.
Of course. Jess, you've got some ums and some ahs there. What are you thinking?
Oh, my heart breaks because I love Loud. I mean, I love both Optic and Loud. I think it's one of my favorite matchups that we have at international events. I was looking over because I remember, and I wrote it down, even though I wasn't working all the games, and obviously I left before. I wrote down everything because I know in future events I'm gonna have to refer to the same, probably the same teams and players, of course. So I was like, okay, what were the games? Because I had to make the argument that now Marv isn't the best player in the world, as I was professing, you know, in Copenhagen. He's had a slower event, so technically he doesn't qualify anymore. So I was like sad about it. But then I finally looked over my notes, and it says here the game where Marv shit the bed. And that's the Loud game. And I was like, okay, well, Marv shit the bed in that game, and Optic still won. And that was the one where I put the asterisk underneath. I said, if Optic can still beat Loud with, you know, their second, third highest rated player shitting the bed, imagine what if all players showed up. And I was like, Loud will be decimated. And that's just using that last game. So obviously the sample data is very small. You're just using one series. You're using a couple, you know, a few maps of the map pool to go off of. But that's what it's leaning towards. Like if I did just a quick analysis, like if I was, you know, an analyst for Loud, I'd be scared because I'd be trying not to replay a certain map. I'd be trying not to show, I'd try not to go back to conditioning aspects and factors that are going to be things that Optic already know and read into. So this is the kind of thing is like, no matter how many times Optic wins against Loud looks so much better. That comes from Sassy actually being able to play at his much more optimal level this tournament. And I still don't think that's enough, because if Sassy is playing at his level that like I wished he had played at, you know, back in the day, and he's doing that now, and I still don't think they can beat Optic. Even with Marv not having a good day at the office, like I'm looking at these numbers, I just don't feel good about it. I don't feel good. Like I want to feel good. My heart says like, let's go Loud. True map banger, and then I just don't think it's gonna happen.
The one thing I'll say that Loud might have going for them, so they got owned in Pearl. They might ban Pearl.
Okay.
Just say screw it, and then because they banned Haven last time, and they've been owning teams on Haven. So it could be. I think just the way the map pool goes might be interesting for Loud. I think Aspas also. I'm looking at it right now. I think Aspas had a terrible fracture too. So that can balance out the Marv having a terrible fracture. I don't know how often Aspas goes 10 and 20 rays. Probably not.
Yeah, but Aspas has like one bad map here and there, whereas Marv had like a whole series.
Yeah. Marv has.
You know what I mean? Like like that whole series was bad. Like I would say that to his face, and I'm sure he would agree. But like, yeah, that was the worst game of my international career. Like I'm sure he would admit that. He'd be like, that's unreal. I've never played like that before. So if he played that bad and like lost every opening engagement, I don't know what kind of negative KD he has overall, but it was awful for him. And they still won. I'm telling you, that's my indicator. I know it seems like such a tenuous kind of indicator, but okay. Is that the Loud one? No, that's not in my notes here.
This is
Here's my gross oversimplification of how I like to look
this
at
must
this
be
matchup.
a separate.
I think
player
this is
for
Masters 1?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think player for player, Loud and Optic are basically parred until you look at IGL, and they get mid-round IGL diffed off the face of the earth. I genuinely think that's where you draw the line. I think that player for player, in terms of firepower, individual mechanics, fundamentals, the teams are basically blow for blow. Then you look at the IGL diff when it gets to the mid-round, when you start talking about all of that conditioning utility, the signals that you give to Optic, FNS just shuts them the fuck down. I can't put
Aspas and Ye on the same pedestal. I can't. Like no matter what you're smoking, I can't do it. Like I can't
look
do
at
it,
their
man.
look
I
at their
can't meet you there.
head-to-heads. Look at their head-to-heads. And
I
just don't.
I just don't.
Math, numbers. What?
I will say to that point though that Ye has been on fire seemingly throughout the entire tournament, right? If Aspas
in this event in particular, and they haven't really met in like this event, I think we'll have to see the head-to-head, but yes, this event, Ye is literally just world-beating. No one can touch him.
Yeah.
These, I think, are the Marv stats that you were looking for, Jess. Yeah, not great for the guy
I've never
who's
seen
usually
him drop this before.
Ice cold. Yeah. This is a sad place to be, especially even like having the lowest cast on the squad. Everybody else above 70%. Marv just seemingly in the wrong place.
I think it was Pearl where he redeemed himself, but that was by that point it was like they had such an easy run because Loud was just gifting them over towards mid and whatnot. Like that's the point of the lurking Marv strategy. Is like you give him a map like Pearl with a mid map design like that, that man is going to scalp you left, right. So I think that really played into his playstyle and helped him. But if they didn't play Pearl in the last map, let's say they played any other map and maybe they won as dominantly, who cares? I don't think his stats look that good. So I'm glad that he's redeemed himself. Honestly, like he looks so much better now. But that's what makes me think they are the best team in the tournament, is they can beat a top 3 team, because I think Loud is a top 3 team, with one of their players having the worst game of, like, that's unprecedented. I don't know what team that can do that. I don't want a team that can beat a top 3 team and have one of their players drop off a cliff. Like, I don't know that. So that's why I'm really confident about Optic. Yeah.
So as we come to the end of the kind of close on our show, it sounds like Optic, we're leaning that way. But Paperthin, I want to get your thoughts. I don't mean to put this on you, but Loud are the only remaining team, I believe, that still have the bald buff.
That's true. That's all. Yeah, we lost Durka, so it's over. It's the bald buff. I mean, I've been trying to channel my bald energy into DRX, so I have no horse in this race. I don't know.
Goodbye, Proxy.
I do love Saucy. I mean, I think he's incredible. I mean, but again, with the way Optic's playing right now, I have a hard time thinking that this is going to be Loud's match. As good as they played, as good as they rocked DRX, especially on Haven, one of their better maps where they had just a solid read on them, top to bottom. But again, all the things everybody's talked about, the mid-rounding IGLing, the fact that Ye is an untouchable god right now. I don't know how you can stop this trade. It's going to take a bad day from Optic, is really what it's going to take, in my opinion. And so, is that going to happen or not?
Yeah.
Is that going to happen? Okay, so last bit before we end the show today, I'm coming to you for the spicy takes. Give it to me. I'm going top to bottom. Anderzz, Paperthin, Weltis, Jess, Anderzz, starting with you. Who wins Champions?
Who wins Champions? Holy
Who wins Champions?
Jesus.
Oh,
we won't have time to talk about it before then.
Chance.
FPX.
Ooh.
FPX.
I love Doom Bros so
the
much.
lower bracket.
Yeah.
All right, Paperthin, who do you got? Who wins Champions?
I think DRX. I'm gonna go. I've been summoning the dark magic now. I've got my DRX jersey surrounded by bottles of soju and Korean beer.
You've sold your soul to the devil.
Channeling. The bald buff wasn't enough. I tried that at Masters 2. That didn't go through. Now we're going deep into the dark territories of esports magic, and I am pulling through for DRX.
Okay, that's like a direct head-to-head. Weltis. Oh, there it is.
I love it. My
Weltis, who do you got?
My brain says Optic. My heart says DRX. So I'd be happy with either of them.
Okay.
Much love.
Right,
I like Weltis thinks a lot like me. There's a head answer, then there's a heart answer always. My head says Optic. Obviously, I've been chanting that this entire segment. My heart actually wants FPX, and not because of this whole 2-time thing and back-to-back or anything like that. It's not nostalgic in any reason like that.
Yeah.
But it's more that if I was to quantify the most impressive team this year, I would say the one that is stuck in my head the most is FPX. And as a result, if there was to be a first ever 2-time, I would want it to be FPX because of what they've been able to show. So yeah, my heart wants them. My head says Optic. And my gut says Loud and DRX. See you later.
Loud and DRX. See you later. As for me, unfortunately, we have run out of time. I can't give my prediction, so we have to close out the show.
This guy.
You guys can't see it here, but if you look back through the show, everybody to follow Weltis Games, JessGOAT. We have Paperthin here and Anderzz. Please, whether it be streaming or Twitter, go check them out for more of their spicy takes. Anderzz always bringing the spicy takes. The analysis coming out of Weltis is fantastic. So please check everybody out. Thank you guys so much for joining. Anderzz, Paperthin, Weltis, and Jess for joining us for this show. It was a good one. We got to talk about everything, and we got some spicy takes as to who's going to win Champions. And obviously, a huge thank you to you guys in the chat and the people that help us put this on. Not only chat, but Twitch and Juke.gg for again, paying the bills. We appreciate you guys for doing that. This was a special episode. Next week, I believe we should be back to the normal time, which would be Tuesday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for some more Valoranting. So thank you guys again, and we'll see you then.